Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Brianna Marie Schneller. Brianna was a vibrant and diligent young woman who excelled academically as the top student at Everest High School in Washington. She had a passion for Mexican cuisine, music, and dancing, and enjoyed thrilling activities like roller coasters. Her parents, Craig and Lori Schneller, described her as an outstanding individual. Brianna had achieved a remarkable feat by being the only student from Wisconsin to qualify for a prestigious national competition in professional and technical fields. She was set to present her project in Tennessee that summer. Her long-term goal was to pursue higher education in restaurant management and eventually start her own business in the food industry. To gain experience and skills, she worked part-time at the El Michal restaurant in Rib Mountain. Colleagues, friends, and customers alike appreciated Brianna's kind and responsive nature. With her graduation and upcoming wedding to her fiancé, 22-year-old Sebastian Ramirez, just around the corner, the future looked bright for this ambitious and talented Brianna. At first, Brianna's parents disapproved of her relationship with Sebastian due to their age difference and their belief that she was growing up too fast. However, after getting to know Sebastian better, they came to trust him and saw that he genuinely loved Brianna and was committed to their future together. The couple eventually moved in together, renting an apartment on 12th Avenue in Wa, along with Sebastian's 19-year-old brother, Hugo. From the outside, it seemed like the three of them got along well and lived harmoniously, with many people envying their friendship. Sebastian and his brother also supported Brianna's interests and worked with her at a local restaurant called El Tequila Salsa. One ordinary workday changed everything for Sebastian and Brianna. No one anticipated the horrific tragedy that would soon unfold, shattering their plans and dreams. On the morning of May 2, 2009, Sebastian was the first to wake up, choosing not to disturb Brianna, who was sleeping peacefully beside him. Since it was her day off from school, she didn't need to rush. While Sebastian was in the shower, Brianna woke up, and they exchanged sweet greetings, discussing their plans for the day. Meanwhile, Sebastian tried to rouse his younger brother, Hugo, who had stumbled in late the night before after overindulging at a party. After getting ready, Sebastian headed to work, just a 5 to 10 minute walk away. Hugo followed soon after, leaving Brianna alone at home, where she chatted with her mother and attended to her tasks. Hugo felt restless and had a headache, probably from drinking too much the night before. He was struggling to focus and regretted overindulging. To get some rest, he decided to swap lunch breaks with a colleague and headed home at 1:20 p.m. When he entered the apartment, everything seemed normal at first. However, as he walked further, he noticed that his brother's and girlfriend's room was in disarray. What caught his attention was Brianna lying on the floor. Hugo rushed to her and asked what had happened, but she didn't respond. At first, he didn't notice the blood. When he moved the towel that had been covering her face, he let out a scream. Brianna was unrecognizably disfigured. Hugo grabbed the phone to call the emergency services, but his hands were shaking and his mind was foggy. Despite his distress, he knew he had to act. He ran to his neighbor's apartment, a floor below, through tears. Young Ramirez tried to explain what had happened and asked her to call for help. On a Saturday afternoon, emergency services received a call despite it being a day of rest. A woman called on behalf of her neighbor, requesting medical help for Brianna, who lay severely injured on the floor, with cuts and a disfigured face, showing no signs of life. Police and paramedics were immediately dispatched. When they arrived at the apartment building, the parking lot was crowded, but one individual, Hugo Ramirez, stood out and approached them. He led the officers to the apartment, where he, barely able to speak, pointed out the shocking scene before them. At the center of it all lay Brianna, her body bearing deep stab wounds on her chest, neck, and wrist. The officers asked him to leave the room while forensic specialists began their examination of the crime scene. The crime scene suggested the victim had been lying there for a while, with dried blood scattered everywhere. Defensive cuts on her arms showed she tried to fight back, but was overpowered. The forensic team found key evidence: a bloody, broken iron on the floor, 2 knives in the sink, one with a missing tip, blood on the soap, and a telling shoe print on the carpet. These details hinted at the brutal attack. No signs of forced entry suggested Brianna knew her attacker or they had a way in without breaking in. Scattered bills, accumulated from work, totaled a substantial sum, but nothing seemed missing. The broken knife tip in her body indicated a violent attack, not robbery. The amount of force needed to break the knife hinted at a strong attacker. Police needed to speak with Brianna's relatives and friends to gather information and convey the devastating news. Craig and Lore Schneller waited anxiously at the police station, unable to reach their daughter after hearing of a tragedy at her home. Their worry turned to dread as officers delivered devastating news, their worst fears confirmed. The loss shattered their lives, dividing their world into before and after. Authorities showed them identification photos, but only those revealing part of her face due to extensive injuries. The confirmation was almost too much to bear. After consulting with the psychologist, Craig and Lori, Brianna's parents, were willing to cooperate with the investigation to help catch the person responsible. They provided as much information as possible about their daughter's life, emphasizing that she had no known enemies or anyone who might hold a grudge against her. Lori was the last person Brianna had communicated with that morning, having messaged her around 10 a.m. to let her know she had taken Brianna's car to the auto repair shop. Brianna responded to the message, which meant the incident occurred after she spoke with her mother and before Hugo arrived, establishing a timeline for the events. The police launched a thorough investigation, starting by interviewing the Rodriguez brothers, Sebastian and Hugo, separately. Sebastian, Brianna's fiancé, reported that he woke up at 9:15 a.m., had a brief conversation with Brianna while getting ready for work, and then woke his brother up. By 10:15 a.m., he was already at the restaurant. He learned about Brianna's death after receiving a phone call. Hugo's account matched his brother's, stating he left the house about 10 to 15 minutes after Sebastian and returned home at 1:20 p.m. because he was feeling unwell and wanted to rest. However, his illness and fatigue disappeared when he discovered Brianna's body. After that, he was in shock, unable to think clearly or react properly, so he ran to a neighbor for help. The Ramirez brothers' statements seemed believable, and their distress appeared genuine. However, the police knew that convincing performances were not enough. They needed concrete evidence to prove their innocence. It was possible that one brother was the killer, and the other was covering for him. To explore this possibility, detectives asked the brothers about their relationships with each other. Sebastian expressed his love for Brianna and his excitement about their upcoming wedding. Hugo was questioned about any potential grudges against his brother's girlfriend, or if they had argued, but he denied any issues. He also clarified that, despite finding Brianna attractive, he had no romantic intentions towards her because he valued his good relationship with his brother and would never interfere with Sebastian's happiness. Hugo considered Brianna like a sister. The police interrogated the brothers for hours, but neither aroused any suspicion. After taking DNA samples, they were allowed to return home. Detectives verified the brothers' alibis by interviewing El Tequila Salsa restaurant employees and reviewing surveillance footage. The evidence confirmed their accounts, ruling out a domestic crime. The new focus became identifying Brianna's killer. Was a predator watching her, striking when she was alone? The investigation continued. The autopsy results confirmed the police's initial suspicions. Brianna was hit on the head with a blunt object, then her throat was slit and she suffered multiple stab wounds. The intense attack left numerous, potentially fatal wounds. Despite the brutality, Brianna fought back fiercely, as evidenced by foreign DNA under her fingernails. Initial claims that nothing was missing proved false. Branna's phone was gone, and Sebastian reported it to detectives. The phone's active signal led police to a nearby restaurant where Sebastian and Hugo worked. The investigation became even more complicated when the brothers provided a solid alibi, and one of them reported the missing phone, which seemed suspicious given the coincidences. Detectives rushed to the location indicated, but instead of a crime scene, they found themselves in the parking lot of a shopping center with a restaurant. After a brief search, they found a plastic takeout bag in a trash bin with the logo of El Tequila Salsa. Inside the bag, they discovered the girl's phone, 2 mismatched gloves, and a pair of women's underwear. One of the gloves was stained with blood. This unexpected discovery changed the direction of the investigation, suggesting that the crime might have been motivated by intimate reasons and involved a predator. The bag and its contents were sent to the laboratory to be analyzed for potential fingerprints or DNA evidence from the perpetrator. When shown a photo of the items, Sebastian identified the underwear as belonging to his girlfriend. The investigation continued, with multiple interrogations of the restaurant staff, and on May 5th, everyone was asked to provide DNA samples and undergo medical examinations to check for scratches or injuries. The police also thoroughly reviewed both internal and external surveillance footage from the restaurant and neighboring establishments. The police faced a significant challenge in identifying who had discarded the bag. Their initial attention focused on a kitchen worker who arrived late to work around the time Brianna's lifeless body was discovered. However, he had a solid alibi, as a traffic stop for speeding en route to the restaurant supported his claim. Fortunately, reviewing surveillance footage greatly aided the investigation. Raul Ponceroa, a 24-year-old kitchen manager, became a person of interest. He left the building at 10:18 a.m. wearing a brown hoodie, but returned without it at 10:53 a.m. Raul claimed he went to pick up friend Luciano, a dishwasher who lived in the same building as the victims. Upon further inquiry, Raul claimed the errand took about 20 minutes, but a discrepancy remained. What happened during the remaining 15 minutes? Raul refused to provide an explanation, while Luciano corroborated Raul's story, stating they didn't stop anywhere on their way to work. Nevertheless, the 15-minute gap continued to trouble detectives, and Raul's behavior raised suspicions, particularly given the unexplained cuts on his hands, which he attributed to working with knives. Raul seemed suspicious, but there wasn't enough evidence to hold him. However, by May 9th, investigators had established a crucial timeline. On May 2nd at 1:16 p.m., a single employee left the back door of El Tequila Salsa, and at the same time, only one person approached the trash bins. It didn't take long to identify the suspect, and surprisingly, it wasn't Sebastian or Hugo Ramirez, as initially suspected, but Raul Ponceroa, the manager. Authorities searched Raul's home, finding intriguing personal items: women's underwear, adult videos, a brown hoodie, and a glove like one found in a trash bin. They sent his DNA for comparison with the plastic bag samples and analyzed a female hair strand on his clothing. With evidence pointing to Brianna, they awaited test results. Once confirmed, Raul was arrested for suspected first-degree murder. Sebastian was stunned, wondering what drove Raul to hurt Brianna, someone they barely knew. Raul had always seemed kind and cheerful, the last person Sebastian suspected of harming anyone. The trial of Raul Ponceroa took place in 2011, following a lengthy investigation. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Raul denied any involvement in the crime and refused to admit guilt. However, the prosecution presented compelling proof, including the presence of Raul's DNA on all key pieces of evidence, such as the iron, knives, plastic bag, and its contents, as well as under Brianna's fingernails. Furthermore, a shoe print found at the crime scene matched the size and pattern of Raul's shoes. Raul arrived at work at 9 a.m. on May 2, 2009, and on his way to the restaurant, he passed the victim's house, which had long fascinated him. Seeing no car, he assumed she was out and took the opportunity to enter her apartment. Raul had a peculiar habit of collecting women's underwear, which was later found under his mattress. After the Rodriguez brothers arrived, Raul left the restaurant, claiming to pick up lunch. Instead, he entered the victim's apartment, easily unlocking the door. He rummaged through her belongings in her room, and when she caught him off guard, he struck her with an iron and slashed her throat with a knife, inflicting multiple injuries. The investigation found that the killer, Raul, took pleasure in the murder, inflicting multiple wounds with different knives. He then tried to cover his tracks, washing his hands and removing his jacket before resuming work as usual. During a lunch break, he disposed of the evidence in a trash bin, unaware he was caught on the kitchen's video recordings. Raul claimed to have met Brianna but didn't kill her, instead implicating a former restaurant employee, Sergio, who he saw at her house on the day of her death. However, Sergio had an alibi, having left the country weeks prior to care for his ill father in Mexico. He testified at the trial, refuting Raul's accusation and disproving any involvement in the crime. Raul's attempt to shift blame failed. The defendant showed no remorse for falsely accusing an innocent person of a heinous crime during the trial. Brianna's relatives, including Sebastian and Hugo, were present and struggled to contain their emotions. Raul Ponrocha was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. He is currently serving his sentence in Wisconsin. Brianna's father stated that her case became personal for many involved, cherishing memories of her. He confessed that her death broke his heart and he lost faith. It is hoped that Sebastian has closed this tragic chapter and moved forward. His brother Hugo later appeared on a TV show discussing their ordeal. Raul's actions were fatal for Brianna, devastating her family's hearts. If he hadn't tried to cover up his tracks, he might have gotten away with clumsy apologies, possibly leading to a confrontation with the Rodriguez brothers. It's unlikely Brianna would have reported him to the police, and even then, the incident could have been resolved with minimal harm. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Catherine Wells Burr. Catherine Wells Burr was born in 1989 in the United Kingdom to parents Phil and Jane Wells Burr. She had an older sister named Lynn. During her 2010 university break, Catherine met Rafal Novak, a 31-year-old employee, on a new vacuum cleaner production line. Rafal, a tall, handsome blonde from Poland, caught her attention. He had moved to England about 4 years earlier, leaving behind a former wife and son. Catherine and Rafal started dating, initially meeting for lunch at the production site's cafe. However, their lunches soon turned into romantic dinners. Rafal wooed Catherine with thoughtful gestures, such as giving her beautiful bouquets, taking her to movies, and going on walks together. As they grew closer, Rafal opened up to Catherine about his past life and his reasons for moving to the UK. Catherine's trusting nature led her to open up completely to the blonde man, Rafal Novak. Their relationship accelerated rapidly, and within a few months, she introduced him to her parents, who warmly welcomed him into the family and hoped for their future happiness together. As their relationship blossomed, the couple began planning their wedding, which was set to take place in 2011. After graduating with honors from Bath Spa University, Catherine secured a promising job as a business analyst at Pneumatic International, the manufacturer of Henry vacuum cleaners. She quickly excelled in her career, generating job opportunities for her parents and sister. Catherine's exceptional qualities, including her intelligence, education, and people skills, made her a remarkable leader. She was empathetic towards her colleagues, always willing to lend a helping hand, and her kind gaze and radiant smile earned her the respect and admiration of those around her. As Catherine's career soared, her substantial earnings, combined with Rafal's, enabled them to purchase a spacious home with a terrace on Willow Way. Catherine and Raphael, a young couple with successful careers, bought a house with a mortgage and secured insurance coverage through their agreement with the bank. They seemed to have everything they needed for happiness. However, their lives took a dramatic turn on September 12, 2012, a day that would be a turning point in their lives. As the investigation into their lives progressed, new and surprising facts came to light. These revelations slowly exposed the deception that had been present in their relationship from the beginning. It turned out that Raphael, 29, had fled Poland to escape significant debts, leaving behind a wife and child. He moved to the UK, where he began a relationship with Anna Lovich in 2008. Later, he met Catherine Welsber, and for a time, he saw both women. Ultimately, he chose Catherine, seeing her as a more suitable partner for building a family and achieving financial stability. Catherine had genuine dreams of a happy marriage with the man she loved and starting a family. However, Novak, her partner, was secretly planning to murder her. He intended to use the life insurance payout and inherit their large house, which Catherine had partially paid for. On the day Catherine disappeared, Novak waited a few hours before approaching her boss, pretending to be worried and distraught. He acted convincingly, deceiving her colleagues and relatives. When Catherine could not be found at her parents' home or her own, and her car was missing, Novak fabricated a story about her receiving threatening letters from a mentally unstable admirer. Her family then contacted the police. The family gathered in the young couple's living room, waiting for Catherine's return, when they received devastating news. A burning car with a body inside had been found. Raphael described the evening before her disappearance as uneventful, saying they went for a walk, bought groceries, had dinner, and watched TV together before bedtime. Catherine seemed normal and not frightened or distressed. However, further investigation revealed that Catherine's death occurred earlier than initially thought. She was strangled around 2 a.m. while sleeping in her own bed. Her body was then placed in the car, driven a short distance from the house, and set on fire to destroy evidence. Despite this, Raphael had a solid alibi, claiming he was at work from 5:30 a.m. and Catherine was still in bed when he left. The burning car was discovered between 6 and 7 a.m., but a crucial detail emerged. Raphael was still at home at 1:30 a.m., significantly changing the direction of the case. As a result, Raphael Novak became the prime suspect in Catherine Welsber's murder. Evidence mounted against him, and he was detained for further investigation. Raphael claimed Catherine was being stalked by someone who had sent her threatening letters and driven her to hysteria. During the investigation, proof of Catherine's secret online life was uncovered, revealing accounts on adult websites and intimate exchanges with men that her loved ones knew nothing about. A letter from a secret admirer was also found, but despite attempts to hide the truth, the evidence ultimately came to light. Raphael tried to mislead the investigation, but he made a critical mistake by not destroying key evidence that linked him directly to Catherine's death. This oversight gave the prosecution a motive to pursue. Examination of Novak's phone revealed that he had ongoing communication and meetings with Anna Lovich over the past few months. Further investigation revealed that Raphael also had a financial motive. Shortly before Catherine's death, they had taken out life insurance policies worth £123,000, with each other as the sole beneficiaries. The significant life insurance payout emerged as the primary motive behind Catherine's murder and the arson of her car, which was intended to throw off the investigation. On the day Catherine disappeared, police found a message on Anna Lovich's phone from Catherine. They also discovered that Anna and her uncle had filled a gas canister at a gas station a few days before the crime. This led them to suspect Anna and her uncle, Todd Dmitry Shin, of being involved in Catherine's disappearance and trying to cover their tracks with arson. The investigation revealed that Anna, her uncle, and a third person had planned the crime meticulously over several months. They created fake accounts on pornographic websites, uploaded doctored photos of Catherine, and fabricated conversations with men to mislead the investigation. However, when confronted with the evidence, Anna and her uncle eventually cracked and started pointing fingers at each other. Anna accused Novak of killing someone for insurance money, while Novak claimed Anna did it out of jealousy towards a rival. The true culprits crafted a deceitful narrative around an innocent young woman, Catherine. They created fake online profiles for her, suggesting she was looking for casual sexual encounters. To cover their tracks, the conspirators went to great lengths to mislead investigators. They set Catherine's body on fire and fabricated a fake history for her, portraying her as a secretive and promiscuous person with many desires. They even created the illusion of a mysterious lover who might have killed her. One of them sent a text from Catherine's phone at 5:17 a.m. on the day she died, implying she was on her way to meet this fictional person. When forensic experts investigated the car fire, they found that Catherine was wearing her favorite nightgown, not the outfit she would have worn to meet a man, as she had claimed. This discovery led them to suspect that she was attacked in her own home rather than in the car. The police also found that a pillow was missing from her bed, and the remaining pillowcase had been recently washed and hung to dry. Further investigation revealed a SIM card in Anna Lovi's trash bin that was linked to the phone number Catherine had supposedly used to send texts that morning. Additionally, detectives discovered notes written by Lovi, indicating that she was trying to come up with ideas for messages to make it seem like Catherine was communicating with a mysterious person. As the evidence against them mounted, Novak and Linovit changed their story, claiming that Catherine's death was actually the work of a hired hitman. However, just before the trial began, Lovi attempted to create a distraction by having a fellow inmate pass on a fake confession from a supposed hitman who claimed to have been paid £20,000 by Novak to kill Catherine. Rafal Novak's girlfriend Catherine was murdered, and a fictional story written by Vinovich sheds light on the gruesome details. The story claims that Catherine's body was found in the trunk of her car, and the killer, supposedly a hitman, helped Novak stage her death to look like a murder-suicide. According to the story, Novak placed Catherine's body in the driver's seat, removed the tape from her mouth, put on her shoes, buckled her seatbelt, and kissed her goodbye before setting the car on fire. In reality, Novak played the role of a grieving boyfriend to perfection, even convincing Catherine's mother, Jane, of his innocence. He told her that Catherine was receiving threatening messages from an ex-boyfriend and that she had spoken of taking her own life. Novak's act was so convincing that Catherine's parents comforted him, unaware that he was responsible for their daughter's death. In fact, Catherine's mother even hugged Novak after her death and allowed him to call her mom. She said that after the police told her in the early days of the investigation that he was seen more as a witness than a suspect, she decided to offer him all the support possible. I thought if Catherine loved him that much and he was part of our family, then he deserved to come back. The lengthy trial commenced under the chairmanship of Justice Sharp. The three defendants stood to gain a significant sum of money and property from Catherine Wells-Burr's death. They had planned to receive a £123,000 life insurance payout and take ownership of her two-bedroom home in Mangold, Somerset, valued at £137,000. During the trial, it was revealed that Rafal Novak showed no emotional response when the police found Catherine's body in her burned-out car on September 12th. Meanwhile, Anna Lagvinovich frequently shook her head and laughed during the proceedings, implying that Novak was responsible for the crime. However, she refused to testify in her own defense. Dmitry Sheen also chose not to take the stand. According to reports, Judge Justice Sharp delivered a scathing rebuke to the defendants, in which she characterized the murder as a terrible, merciless crime that had been cold-bloodedly committed with a gross breach of trust. Furthermore, it was reported that during sentencing, none of the three defendants displayed any emotion. Judge Sharp imposed mandatory life sentences on the three Polish nationals with a minimum of 32 years in prison and no possibility of early release. According to Judge Sharp, the defendants had taken the life of a beautiful young woman who had everything to live for, solely for financial gain. Judge Sharp specifically rebuked Rafal Novak, saying, "The photos of you holding Catherine's hand the evening before her death and buying groceries for what you knew was her last dinner are utterly chilling. Your emotions were directed only at yourself." Turning to Anna Lagvinovich, Judge Sharp declared, "Your behavior was deceitful, manipulative, and cruel. You played your full part in this horrendous crime." The judge addressed Dmitry, stating that the murder was driven by financial gain, with aggravating circumstances and no mitigating factors. The judge emphasized that the only sympathy should be reserved for Catherine's family, including her mother Jane, father Philip, and sister Lynn, who have suffered greatly. The judge expressed deep condolences to Catherine's parents, noting that they were deceived by Rafal Novak's facade, unaware of his true nature, which was devoid of remorse and decency. The judge reiterated that the crime was motivated by greed, as Novak and Catherine had no personal ties, being neither married nor having children together. In contrast, the case of Anna Lagvinovich was driven by jealousy and a desire for revenge. At the request of the parents, Judge Justice Sharp read statements from Catherine's mother and sister. Catherine's mother was overcome with emotion in the courtroom as her statement was read, describing her daughter as a caring, loving, sincere, generous, loyal, thoughtful, exceptional, and amazing young woman. "My daughter had a bright and promising future with unlimited potential." As her parents, Phil and I couldn't help but feel immense pride in the young woman she was becoming. However, our lives were forever changed by the cruel and calculated act that took Catherine's life away from us. The hatred shown to her is something that will haunt us for the rest of our lives. I'm left with the unbearable pain of never having had the chance to say goodbye, to tell her how much I love her, or to hear her say, "I love you, Mommy," one last time. Catherine Wells-Burr's father, Philip, was outraged that his daughter's boyfriend, Rafal Novak, had betrayed their trust. Novak had been living with them and was like a son, but he was accused of murdering Catherine. Despite his innocent claims, Novak showed no emotion when Catherine's body was found and initially didn't mention her when questioned by police. Instead, he asked for a steak dinner. Catherine's mother, Jane Wells-Burr, testified that she had concerns about Novak when he and Catherine bought a house together and took out a life insurance policy. She believed Catherine's life was in danger and that she had signed her own death warrant by signing the mortgage. In the end, the jury found Novak guilty of murdering Catherine by suffocating her with a pillow while she slept. He had planned the murder with his secret lover, Anna Lagvinovich, and her uncle, Tavush Dmitry Shine, to claim a life insurance payout of £123,000 and a share of the house. Vinovich and Sheen helped dispose of the body by transporting it in Vinovich's car to a remote location where they set it on fire. Meanwhile, Novak had already started his workday, providing himself with an alibi. The three Polish nationals were found guilty of the crime by the Royal Court of Bristol. The events leading up to the murder involved secret meetings and phone calls between Novak and Vinovich, who were unaware that Catherine was involved in a love triangle. To mislead detectives, they created fake online profiles for Catherine on adult websites and sent her messages from a supposed mysterious admirer. Catherine's parents have called for stricter immigration controls following her death. They believe that if the UK had immigration rules as strict as those in the US, Novak, who was convicted of assaulting his wife in Poland, would not have been allowed into the country. The couple blames the European Union for the current lax entry measures for foreign nationals. Jane Wells-Burr emphasized that people entering the UK are not properly vetted, pointing out that they were unaware of Novak's previous assault charge in Poland. Catherine's family members broke down in tears as the sentence was handed down in court, while the three convicted perpetrators remained emotionless. The trio received life sentences with no possibility of parole. In essence, the three immigrants from Poland had exchanged their aspirations for a successful and wealthy life for a lifetime of imprisonment due to their own actions. Following the verdict, Catherine's mother delivered a heartfelt tribute to her daughter, describing her as a beautiful girl, absolutely beautiful. She recalled her daughter's accomplishments and remembered her as determined, hardworking, and full of potential for a happy life. To our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Stephen Freeman. Stephen Andrew Freeman was born on January 1st, 1995, in Thomason, Georgia, to Troy and Jennifer Freeman. He and his brother Blake grew up in a happy and healthy environment with no major issues with their parents or society. Stephen was known for being kind, responsive, and calm, which helped him make many friends. Stephen attended Spalding High School and later studied at Gordon State College in Griffin, Georgia. Mary Catherine Higdon, his future partner, came from a respectable family and was raised with a carefree and humorous spirit. She was creative and enjoyed putting on mini plays for her family and neighbors. Stephen and Mary fell deeply in love during their senior year and remained inseparable. They shared many common interests, including a love for nature, hiking, fishing, and hunting. In 2012, Stephen updated his Facebook status to reflect his relationship with Mary, and the couple frequently posted photos together. Both families accepted each other's children, and after completing their education, the young couple moved in together. Stephen worked as a plumber, while Mary was a teacher's assistant and part-time salesperson. By summer 2018, Stephen and Mary had been living together for 7 years, but they had not yet gotten married. On August 1st, 2018, at 10:42 p.m., Mary called emergency services in a state of panic. She reported that she had accidentally shot her boyfriend while handling a Glock 43 firearm, unaware that it was loaded. When paramedics and police arrived, Mary was in shock, kneeling beside Stephen's motionless body, crying and begging for help. She was eventually pulled away, allowing the officers to examine Stephen and provide first aid. Despite being shot in the chest, Stephen was still breathing and was rushed to Spalding Regional Hospital. Sadly, he died just before midnight. In shock and struggling to comprehend the tragedy, Mary visited the police station to give her account of the events. She claimed that the shot was accidental, explaining that there were always firearms in their home for self-defense, and that Stephen would often leave a pistol on the nightstand before sleep. On the fateful evening in question, Mary Catherine claimed she only intended to hand Stephen the pistol, but it accidentally discharged. She insisted she didn't know the gun was loaded and would never harm Stephen, the love of her life, intentionally. However, investigators discovered signs of a struggle in the kitchen, with food and dishes scattered everywhere. Detectives Adam Trammell and Chris Wilson found Mary's story highly unlikely and decided to investigate further. They questioned Mary again, using pressure tactics to get to the truth. Eventually, Mary confessed to shooting Stephen in anger during an argument. She revealed that she wanted to leave him, and the argument escalated. The investigators recorded the conversation, but unfortunately, most of the recording was lost due to technical issues. Further investigation showed that the pistol couldn't have fired accidentally, as it required a deliberate trigger pull. Moreover, the bullet's trajectory indicated that the pistol was pointed directly at Stephen. The detectives also questioned Mary's behavior, suspecting she was overacting and exaggerating her distress. It was also revealed that Mary worked at a gun store where she received thorough training on handling firearms. This meant she knew how to safely handle the pistol, making the accidental discharge scenario unlikely. The investigation uncovered inconsistencies in Mary's statements, including a claim that she tossed the pistol to Stephen, causing it to discharge. This contradicted her initial statement that she was simply handing him the pistol when it fired. Mary's changing statements worked against her, suggesting she was lying and trying to conceal her guilt. She was detained and charged with multiple crimes, including felony murder and aggravated assault. During the trial, Lieutenant Wilson disputed Mary's claim of an accident, instead arguing that she had planned and executed the crime deliberately. A key piece of evidence was the presence of cooking grease on the pistol's slide, which Mary explained was due to her preparing dinner for Stephen that evening. Friends and relatives of the couple described their complicated and tumultuous relationship, marked by frequent arguments and instances of Mary threatening to harm Stephen or herself with a weapon. Despite the complexities of the case, the evidence ultimately pointed to Mary's guilt. Stephen and Mary Catherine had a tumultuous relationship, with many weapons present in their home. 2 days before the tragedy on July 30th, 2018, they exchanged warm messages wishing each other a good day. However, the next day, Stephen told his mother he wouldn't return home to that devil and stayed at his friend Thomas's place. On August 1st, 2018, when Stephen didn't come home, Mary sent him hundreds of messages begging him to return. She prepared dinner and waited for him, later learning he was at Thomas's place and going to pick him up. They encountered each other on the road, and Mary shouted that she was waiting for him at home for dinner. Stephen replied that he was coming home. However, the evening ended in tragedy instead of a reconciliatory dinner. The police initially believed the case was a premeditated act driven by Mary's anger, but her defense team revealed a different side to their relationship. At her trial on June 17, 2019, Mary Catherine Higdon refused a plea deal for life imprisonment, insisting she couldn't harm Stephen because he was the love of her life. Mary claimed the incident was an accident and that she loved Stephen. She also accused him of abusive behavior, stating that he hit her twice and forced himself on her on the day of the tragedy. Friends and relatives testified that Mary was furious because Stephen often ignored her messages and calls. On the night of the incident, Stephen refused to eat the dinner Mary had prepared, which was the final straw for her. She couldn't hold back and fired at him. The prosecution presented physical evidence, including grease on the pistol and a sheet with bloodstains, showing that Stephen was not attacking Mary, but was sitting still on the bed when she shot him. In court, Mary finally gave a truthful testimony, describing Stephen as a harsh and controlling tyrant who had repeatedly hit, shaken, and threatened her. She confessed that he had constantly controlled and manipulated her, driving her to despair with unreasonable jealousy. The defense presented ample evidence to support her claims, including text messages that raised questions about who was the real tyrant and betrayer in the relationship. Stephen's message snippets suggested that he had insulted Mary Catherine and threatened her. However, what really sparked his anger was more disturbing. According to his friends, Stephen was furious with his girlfriend because he believed she had been unfaithful, which Mary denied. Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen had assaulted her twice before, and she feared he would hurt her again on August 1st, 2018. That's why she took action in self-defense. The defense presented an expert and close relatives of Mary who could testify to the domestic violence. Mary's sister, Sarah Higdon, confirmed that she saw bruises on Mary's arm 2 weeks before the shooting, though she regrets not taking a photo and initially believing Mary's explanation that the bruises were accidental. A tearful Mary Higdon told the jury that on the night of the incident, she decided to end things with Stephen once and for all, telling him to leave the house. Stephen became enraged, attacked her, and in self-defense, she grabbed the pistol from the nightstand, accidentally firing it. After Mary Catherine gave emotional testimony, the prosecution and defense teams clashed with Stephen's former friends, who had been close to Mary for years, as they tried to portray their deceased friend in a positive light. Thomas Skinner, Stephen's best friend, described Stephen as a loyal and hard-working country boy, while portraying Mary Catherine as an obsessive and possessive girlfriend who constantly controlled and stalked him. According to Thomas, Mary Catherine and Stephen's relationship had become toxic over time, with Mary threatening to end her life whenever Stephen tried to leave her. He also claimed that during an argument, Mary had once pointed a pistol at her head in front of Stephen. Another witness, Alicia Varela, who worked with Stephen, testified that Mary would obsessively call Stephen throughout the day, even when he was at work. However, during her court testimony, Mary omitted a crucial detail that prosecutor Kate Lenhard highlighted. While Mary described their interactions and how their relationship had deteriorated into physical abuse, she never mentioned the moment when she claimed to have acted in self-defense and pulled the trigger. Prosecutor Kate Lenhard was skeptical of Mary's admission, pointing out that during cross-examination, Mary never mentioned being mistreated by Stephen. Lenhard repeatedly asked Mary if a woman who felt safe at home would confront her attacker late at night and bring him back home, but Mary's response was unconvincing. Lenhard then recreated the events of the accidental shooting as she believed they occurred. According to her version, Stephen came home, and after listening to Mary, they got into an argument because he refused to eat dinner. Enraged, Mary threw the prepared food around the kitchen. Stephen tried to avoid further conflict by going to the bedroom and sitting on the bed, likely waiting for Mary to calm down. However, Mary was determined to confront him, calling out to him twice without getting a response. She then entered the bedroom and shot Stephen in the left side of his neck. Kate Lenhard pointed out the inconsistencies in Stephen Freeman's stories during police interrogations and court hearings, highlighting the contradictions in his accounts. Mary Catherine Higdon provided an emotional testimony about the alleged abuse she suffered at the hands of Stephen Freeman. However, before handing the case over to the jury, Kate Lenhard urged them to consider the possibility that Mary Higdon was not acting in self-defense, but rather was a mastermind of manipulation. The prosecution presented additional evidence and counter-arguments despite the lost confession recording. A forensic examination showed that Stephen Freeman was sitting on the bed at the time of the shooting, making it impossible for him to have been attacking Mary Higdon. Furthermore, while Mary claimed that the gun was always kept unloaded, detectives suspected that the pistol was actually loaded on the evening of August 1, 2018, when Mary was preparing a rope for Stephen. Here's a clearer explanation. The presence of grease marks on the slide and inside the pistol led investigators to suspect that Mary Catherine might have loaded the pistol beforehand. However, those who knew Stephen Freeman, including colleagues, neighbors, family friends, and acquaintances, consistently described him as non-aggressive. Meanwhile, Mary Catherine changed her story at least 10 times during the investigation, which prosecutors attributed to fear. Mary Catherine rejected a plea deal because she was facing a potential death sentence. As the jury deliberated, they heard from all the witnesses and the accused. After just 10 minutes, the jury was ready to deliver their verdict, but 2 jurors had lingering doubts about the prosecution's case. These jurors felt that the investigators, in their eagerness to charge Mary Catherine with premeditated murder, had overlooked crucial facts. They were particularly concerned that the prosecution had failed to thoroughly investigate Stephen Freeman's phone, including his text messages and browsing history. Ultimately, the only significant evidence against Mary Catherine was her own lies, which weren't enough to prove her guilt. The jurors' arguments, particularly those of Victor and Chris, had a significant impact. After deliberating, the jury returned a unanimous verdict of not guilty, freeing Mary Catherine Higdon after a lengthy process. The 12 jurors reached the following conclusions. They found the defendant not guilty on the first charge of malicious action and the second charge of serious action. The judge subsequently acquitted Mary Catherine Higdon of all charges, including intentional action, reckless action, assault with a deadly weapon, and carrying a weapon during the commission of a crime. The verdict shocked many in the courtroom, including Jennifer Freeman, who struggled to contain her anger towards the jurors. Those supporting Stephen's family were also stunned by the outcome. Following her acquittal, Mary Catherine returned home to Griffin to be with her family. Since then, she has maintained a low profile, avoiding social media to evade unwanted media and public attention. Mary Catherine's Instagram profile is private, and there is no information available about her current location. It is believed that she has moved on from her difficult past and is now living a quiet, private life. Stephen Freeman's mother paid tribute to her son on social media, remembering him as a kind and loving person. He lived a life full of love, joy, and friendship, and everyone who knew him considered him a friend. He especially cherished the relationships he made while hunting and fishing. Stephen had a special way of showing love and care to those around him. He made people feel seen and heard, often making them laugh until they cried. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Corey Desmond. Corey Desmond was born on March 18, 1980, at Torrance Memorial Hospital, where she immediately faced a life-or-death struggle due to a hole in her diaphragm. Despite the odds against her, Corey underwent multiple surgeries and defied a 20% chance of survival, not only recovering but thriving as well. Those who knew Corey described her as a bright, self-assured young woman who wasn't afraid to speak her mind. She was energetic, affectionate, and cared deeply for many people. After graduating from North Torrance High School, Corey earned a master's degree in criminal justice from Long Beach State. However, she later changed her mind and decided to pursue a teaching career. Sadly, Corey's life was cut short, but just a week after her passing, a notice arrived in the mail confirming that she had earned her teaching credential. Corey was loved by many and had a special gift for connecting with people. Corey had formed close bonds with her co-workers at various bars and restaurants, which made her want to continue working in the industry despite her family's disapproval. On Saturday, February 14, 2009, Corey finished her shift at a bar at 9:30 p.m. and walked 2 blocks to Street Lounge, a popular bar where many of her friends worked. Surveillance cameras captured her helping out her friends at the bar until it closed around 2 a.m. After that, none of her friends saw her again. 2 days later, on Monday, February 16th, at around 2:20 p.m., the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office received a call from a driver who was about 100 miles away from the bar where Corey was last seen. The driver had stopped to remove snow chains from his tires when he noticed a strong, unpleasant odor. Initially, he thought it was from an animal that had been hit by a car, but he decided to investigate. A short distance from his car, he found a black plastic garbage bag containing a woman's body. Panicked, the driver ran into the road, flagging down cars and asking someone to call the police, as his phone was out of PIN. The victim, 28-year-old Corey Day Desmond, was identified through fingerprints and her driver's license. She had suffered a brutal attack, dying from strangulation, with multiple bruises on her face and neck, and head injuries. Despite her efforts to fight back, evident from defense wounds, she succumbed to the assault. Although the exact time of death couldn't be determined, experts estimated that Corey's body had been lying on the street for 12 to 36 hours before it was discovered. Notably, her pants were found unbuttoned and pulled down to her knees, but there was no evidence of sexual assault. Investigators concluded that the location where the body was found was not the site of the murder. The killer likely dumped Corey's body by the side of the road and hoping it would take time for it to be discovered. Before the police found her body, a rainstorm had washed away any potential evidence. Breaking the news to families of the deceased or missing is one of the toughest parts of a policeman's job. The news of Corey's body being discovered in a garbage bag was devastating for her grandmother, with whom Corey was living, and just as shocking for Mark, Corey's father. Mark was well aware of how the system worked and knew that investigations could be delayed for months due to the need for warrants for searches, interrogations, and fingerprinting. He also knew that bureaucratic red tape could slow down the process of solving a crime. Instead of waiting for the police to find Corey's killer, Mark decided to take matters into his own hands. Driven by his love for his daughter, Mark began searching for the person responsible. He discovered Corey's abandoned Jeep Wrangler in an alley near the bar where she worked. He also learned that Corey had gone missing on the night of February 15th, although no one had realized it at the time. Corey's grandmother hadn't been alarmed because Corey was an adult and could have stayed overnight at a friend's house. To piece together the events of the evening, investigators visited the bar where Corey worked as a waitress. They spoke with her co-workers, who revealed that Corey had finished her shift at 9:30 p.m. and then headed to another bar where her friends were working. This was a common routine for Corey, as she would often socialize with her friends and even lend a hand at the bar, earning extra tips in the process. Many regulars at the bar recognized Corey and thought she was a part of the staff. Security cameras confirmed this account, capturing footage of Corey assisting her friends behind the counter. However, on this evening, Corey's luck took a turn for the worse. She got into an argument with a drunk and disorderly man who was making inappropriate comments and inappropriately touching women. When a disruptive man showed up at the bar, Corey stood up for the other patrons and told him he wasn't welcome. The man became furious, but eventually agreed to leave. Corey went back to helping her friends and serving drinks as if nothing had happened, and even though she drank some alcohol that evening, it didn't seem to affect her behavior. After 2 a.m., Corey left the bar alone, planning to head home. But tragically, her body was found 100 miles away the next day. Mark helped the police by sharing any information he could find on TV and appealed to others to come forward with any crucial details. Meanwhile, the police identified the man who had gotten into a fight with Corey before her death. When questioned by investigators, the man claimed not to know Corey Desmond, but admitted to having a big fight with a woman at a bar on February 14th. He blamed his behavior on alcohol, saying it made him lose control, and confirmed that he was kicked out of the bar afterwards and went home to sleep. The man denied any involvement in the crime and agreed to take a polygraph test and let the police search his house and car. The investigators thoroughly searched the suspect's car, looking for any signs of evidence, such as bloodstains, hair, or personal belongings of Corey. Despite the car being dirty inside and out, forensic experts found nothing. They also searched his house, but found no indication of his involvement in the crime. The police then turned to a polygraph test as their last hope to catch the suspect, but he passed it easily, answering all their questions. His wife corroborated his alibi, stating that he returned home before 2 a.m. and went straight to bed. Since Corey left the bar around 2 a.m., it seemed clear that this man was not involved in her death. Consequently, the police removed him from their list of suspects, but they were left with no other leads or persons of interest in the investigation. Investigators looked into her personal life to see if she had any enemies who might have wanted to harm her. They discovered a strange detail. Corey had stopped by the bar where she worked to ask to use the restroom, but the owner refused since the bar was closed and told her to go home. This was around 2:20 a.m., but what happened after that remains unknown because Corey never got in her car and didn't go home. The investigators thought that Corey might have been abducted or attacked near her workplace, but the bar's security cameras didn't capture anything, and there were no witnesses on the street at that late hour. When Corey died, her blood alcohol level was more than 4 times the legal limit for driving, but it's unclear whether she was planning to drive or looking for another way to get home. Unfortunately, Corey didn't encounter anyone who could help her that night. A month into the investigation, the police had checked all leads and found no new suspects, reaching a dead end. However, Corey's father, Mark, was not ready to give up. He rented 3 billboards on Aria Boulevard in Redondo Beach. Information about Corey was displayed on 50 electronic billboards, which eventually led to a breakthrough in the case. In May 2009, the police received a call from a woman named Tiffany who had seen Corey's photo on one of the billboards. Tiffany's tip helped the police solve the case. She was clearly nervous and upset, speaking quietly and rambling at first. However, she eventually composed herself and explained that she thought her boyfriend, Tony Lopez Perez, might have killed Corey Desmond. She added that he had been acting strangely and that she would like to talk to them more about it in person. Tiffany arranged to meet with the detective in a park where she shared her suspicions. She told him that on Valentine's Day, she and Tony had planned a romantic dinner. She spent the evening getting ready, dropping off her kids at her parents' house, getting her hair done, and buying a new red dress, which Tony particularly liked. Tony was working that day, but was supposed to come home around 11:30 p.m. Tiffany waited up for Tony all night, but he didn't respond to her calls and messages. When he finally returned home at 4:30 a.m., he claimed to be too drunk to drive and said he had fallen asleep in his car. Tiffany found this suspicious, especially since Tony rarely cleaned his car, but afterwards, he suddenly bought cleaning products and washed the car thoroughly, refusing her help. A few days later, Tony sold his white Dodge for a low price and bought a new car without explanation. He also changed his phone number for no apparent reason. On their trip to Big Bear Lake, Tony's behavior seemed normal at first, but then he stopped the car and asked Tiffany if she thought the body of a murdered bartender had been dumped there. He seemed certain that the police had found her body in that exact location. Tony Lopez Perez and Tiffany had lived together for about 4 years and had a 6-year-old son, but they were never married. Tony was a hard-working and well-liked man with no criminal record. He came from a large family with 8 siblings, and his parents had grown up in the LA area. Tony had attended high school in Manhattan Beach. However, after Corey Desmond's death, Tiffany began to notice some suspicious behavior from Tony. He was absent on the day of Corey's death, and later he was seen cleaning his car urgently and trying to sell it quickly. He also made a strange comment about where the police found Corey's body. Additionally, he changed his phone number and displayed odd behavior. When Tiffany connected these dots, she realized that Tony might be involved in Corey's death. She was hesitant to believe it, but she agreed to cooperate with the investigators. They decided to interview Tony at his house, making it seem like a routine witness inquiry into Corey's case. Tiffany played along, not revealing to Tony that she suspected him. During the interview, Tony appeared calm and composed, answering questions without showing any nervousness. He claimed he didn't know Corey, saying he had only seen her in the newspapers. To gather enough evidence to arrest Tony Lopez Perez for Corey's murder, the police needed concrete proof. They tracked down the new owner of the Dodge that Tony had sold quickly after Corey's death was reported. The new owner confirmed that Tony had sold him the car at a suspiciously low price and allowed the police to search the vehicle for clues. Tiffany revealed that Tony had thoroughly cleaned the interior before selling it, but the police discovered something incriminating when they used luminol and an ultraviolet lamp to examine the car. This revealed why Tony had been to get rid of his car. The police arrested Tony and took him to the station without revealing what they had discovered. Initially, Tony denied knowing Corey, but later changed his story, claiming he had seen her outside a bar and whistled at her. However, when the police showed him photos of a car he had sold, which contained crucial evidence, Tony's story changed again. This time, Tony claimed that Corey had become unconscious on the sidewalk outside the bar. He said he tried to help her, but she woke up screaming and told him to leave her alone. Tony alleged that, in fear, he covered her mouth and accidentally strangled her. Panicked that he would be blamed for Corey's death, Tony placed her body in the back seat of his car and drove home. He said he woke up in the middle of the night, checked on the body, and realized it wasn't just a nightmare. The next morning, Tony went to work with Corey's body still in the car. After his shift, he put the body in 2 garbage bags and abandoned it in a remote area. Tony claimed that he accidentally strangled Corey while drunk and scared, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Corey's injuries were severe, including head wounds, facial and neck bruises, and defensive wounds on her hands. Her pants were also found down to her knees, implying a more deliberate and violent act. Tony was arrested and charged with first-degree deprivation of life. He led the police to Corey's body the next day. The investigation produced DNA evidence, which matched Corey's blood to blood found in the car Tony sold shortly after the crime. At the 2011 trial, Coroner Jack Sheraton testified to the extent of Corey's injuries, including multiple head contusions, signs of strangulation, and blunt force trauma to her face. He also found scratches on her body, indicating that the killer had dragged her after death. Prosecutors argued that Tony had assaulted Corey, attempting to force her into sexual intimacy in the early morning of February 15, 2009. When Corey resisted, Tony strangled her. Tiffany Ware, a former girlfriend of Tony's, testified at the trial, revealing that Tony had an insatiable appetite for sex in January and February 2009. Despite their frequent daily sexual encounters, Perez remained unsatisfied. Additionally, Tiffany revealed to the court that Tony had forced himself on her without her consent on 2 separate occasions. These incidents took place about a month apart, shortly after the birth of their son. On both occasions, Tiffany was unconscious on the couch, having taken painkillers for severe back pain. Perez spoke to the court for the first time during his sentencing. He acknowledged that he had strayed from the values of love and respect he was taught, which normally made him a caring father, uncle, and family provider. He admitted that he failed to live up to these principles and fell short. Perez largely stuck to the version of events presented by his lawyer, Andrew Hanel, during the trial. According to Hanel, Perez found the victim, Corey, unconscious on the sidewalk and tried to calm her down, but didn't intend to harm her. Perez expressed regret, saying that he should have taken a moment to think before acting. Instead, he let fear take over and acted carelessly. Corey's father, Mark Desmond, mourned the loss of his 28-year-old daughter, who had a promising future ahead of her. He condemned Perez, saying that he not only took Corey's life, but also crushed the hopes and dreams of his own children. Mark Desmond described Perez as embodying the characteristics that women often fear in society. Before being sentenced, Perez asked God in court to show him mercy and apologized to both the Desmond family and his own family for causing them harm. He acknowledged that his actions would have a lasting impact on the Desmond family's lives. Desmond's grandmother, Beverly, expressed her desire for Perez to never be released from prison and to suffer as much as her granddaughter had. In July 2011, a jury found Tony Lopez Perez guilty of first-degree deprivation of life, resulting in a life imprisonment sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Corey Desmond's family thanked Tiffany, whose information helped the police solve the case. A family friend, Leslie Schwab, attended the trial and credited Tiffany with helping the police catch Perez, saying that without her, they might not have identified him as the perpetrator. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Katie Sepich. Katie Sepich's mom described her as an outgoing, vibrant, and intelligent 22-year-old. Born and raised in Carlsbad, New Mexico, Katie was the eldest of 3 siblings. She earned a business degree from New Mexico State University and was planning to pursue her MBA in the fall. In addition to her studies, Katie worked as a waitress at a local Mexican restaurant. During her time at the university, she met Joe Bischoff, and their initial friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship. Katie confided in her mom, Jayan, about her happiness with Joe and her desire to build a future together. Months later, Joe proposed to Katie with a diamond ring, making her dreams seem within reach. However, after they graduated in the summer of 2003, their relationship began to struggle. They faced challenges when Katie decided to continue her studies, while Joe returned to his parents' home in Gallup, New Mexico, a small city 350 miles from Las Cruces. Katie was devastated when Joe had to leave, making their long-distance relationship extremely difficult. Despite the challenges, they found ways to reunite occasionally. One such opportunity arose on Labor Day weekend in 2003, when Joe visited Katie and Katie was ecstatic. However, their reunion took a devastating turn. On Saturday, August 30, 2003, Katie enjoyed a fun night out with Joe and their friends, visiting several bars before ending up at a local house party. But after that, Katie vanished. The next day, Katie's mother, Jayan, received a life-changing phone call. Jayan recalled the moment she discovered her daughter was missing. She described how, on August 31, 2003, her family had woken up to a beautiful day filled with friends and family as they prepared to celebrate Labor Day weekend with a cookout. Then, at 2:15 that afternoon, the phone had rung, Veronica asking if they had talked to Katie that day. Veronica, Katie's roommate, was frantically calling everyone who knew Katie, trying to find out if they had seen her. She had already contacted all of Katie's friends and even checked with local hospitals, but no one had any information about her whereabouts. According to Veronica, Katie had left a party alone the previous night. Veronica and her boyfriend Joe had stayed behind and fallen asleep at the party house. They assumed Katie had gone home, but when they woke up the next morning, Katie was nowhere to be found. Katie's family immediately notified the police and filed a missing persons report. Shortly after, a disturbing discovery was made near a desert landfill. A deceased female body, partially undressed and exhibiting clear signs of a recent and intentional murder. The police were called to the scene and found no identification near the body. However, they could tell that the body had been there for no more than a day. The victim appeared to be between 20 and 25 years old, and the fact that she was naked from the waist down suggested that the motive behind the crime was likely sexual. The victim's body showed signs of strangulation, leading investigators to initially suspect it as the cause of death. Upon closer inspection, they noticed no signs of struggle near the body, indicating that she likely died elsewhere and was moved to the desert landfill to delay discovery. Further examination revealed burn marks on her arms and back, suggesting the perpetrator attempted to dispose of the body or destroy evidence by setting her on fire. The police soon connected the dots between Katie's disappearance and the unidentified body. Katie's father was tasked with identifying the body at the morgue, an experience that left him and his wife, Gianna, shattered. The body was their daughter, Katie. The police's first step was to interview Katie's roommate, Veronica, and her boyfriend, Joe. It was unusual that they stayed at the party while Katie left alone in the middle of the night. However, Joe was uncooperative, claiming that Katie had left her belongings behind. The detective retraced Katie's likely route, knocking on doors and speaking with residents, hoping to gather information. Unfortunately, no one reported seeing or hearing anything unusual. However, one discovery suggested that Katie may have reached her house but never entered it. Katie left her house without her keys. The investigator found her shoes outside her bedroom window, suggesting she tried to sneak back in. It looks like someone attacked her at that moment, as evidenced by footprints in the gravel. Katie put up a fight, but sadly, her attacker was too strong. The police think the killer then took her body to a desert landfill and tried to burn. The investigation focused on the party Katie attended earlier that night, which about 40 people went to. It's possible someone followed her home and attacked her. Could it have been her boyfriend, Joe? The police interviewed everyone at the party and discovered something important that Joe hadn't mentioned. Katie saw him kissing another girl, which led to a fight and her decision to leave alone, forgetting her purse. Katie was furious and wanted to escape the party as quickly as possible. However, when the police first questioned Joe, he didn't mention the argument they had. He also didn't tell Katie's parents, who were wondering why she left the party alone, about the fight. Later, the investigators questioned Joe again, telling him they knew about the argument because Katie saw him kissing another girl. Joe admitted it was true. He claimed that after Katie left, he followed her in his car, but only drove up to her house and didn't go inside. He thought she was asleep because her bedroom light was off, so he returned to the party. It turned out Joe wasn't at the party when Katie was attacked. None of the partygoers could confirm exactly when Joe got back. He might have had time to commit the crime take Katie's body to the desert, and return to the party. When the investigators questioned the party attendees, they found another suspicious detail. After returning to the party, Joe started calling Katie's cell phone, which was in her purse. He found the phone when it started ringing and knew it belonged to Katie. Despite this, Joe continued calling her phone until morning. The investigators were puzzled by Joe's behavior and wondered if he was trying to create an alibi or feign concern for his girlfriend Katie. They wanted to question him further, but Joe refused to cooperate with the police. His absence from Katie's funeral only fueled their suspicion. The investigators needed to obtain his DNA sample and compare it to the DNA evidence found on Katie's body. The evidence included human skin cells discovered under her fingernails, which were identical in all 3 locations. However, getting Joe's DNA sample proved to be a challenge. He was out of town, and his parents had hired a lawyer who informed the police that Joe was refusing to provide a DNA sample. Looking at Joe's suspicious behavior, everyone was convinced he was hiding something and possibly involved in Katie's death. The police needed a legitimate way to obtain his DNA to confirm their suspicions, but it took time. While they worked on that, they also explored other leads, investigating similar cases to see if Katie was the only victim. The DNA samples found on Katie's body didn't match anyone in the national database. So, the investigators went back to the party where it all started. They asked all the male attendees to provide a DNA sample, and everyone agreed since they had nothing to hide. However, none of their DNA samples matched the one found on Katie's body, which led the investigators back to Joe. He was the only one who refused to provide his DNA, but the police found another way to get it. They discovered that Joe and Katie had been intimate in her bedroom before the party. The police took the bedsheet from Katie's room, hoping to find Joe's DNA, and they were successful. However, the male DNA found on the bedsheet didn't match the one found on Katie's body, clearing Joe of any involvement in her death. This raised another question. Why had Joe refused to cooperate with the police if he wasn't involved in Katie's death? After receiving the test results from the police, Joe's lawyer informed him that he was no longer a suspect. With this new information, Joe decided to cooperate with the police and provide a DNA sample. The subsequent test confirmed the initial finding: Joe was not involved in Katie's murder. When questioned about his initial reluctance to cooperate, Joe explained that he and Katie had been intimate before the party, and he worried that his DNA would be found on her body. Despite being cleared, the circumstances surrounding Joe's behavior on the night of Katie's death remained unclear to both the police and Katie's family. With Joe no longer a suspect, the investigation turned its focus to other leads. Several partygoers reported that Katie wore rings, including one given to her by Joe, but none were found on her body when it was discovered. The police believed the killer must have removed them. Although they searched local pawn shops, Katie's jewelry was never found. Another potential clue was a set of tire tracks near where Katie's body was discovered. Forensic experts were able to identify the brand and model of the tires. The manufacturer informed the police that these tires were commonly used on pickup trucks. The case of Katie's murder reached a dead end until a similar crime occurred in Green Bay, Wisconsin, about a year later. A girl was attacked and set on fire, but miraculously, she survived by pretending to be dead until her attackers left. She sought help at a nearby house and described her assailants to the police as 2 Hispanic males. The police published sketches of the suspects, which led a farmer to identify them as his workers, Gregorio Morales and Juan. One of them had relatives in Las Cruces, where Katie was killed, and often visited them. They were arrested, and the police believed they had finally caught Katie's killer. However, DNA analysis proved otherwise. The DNA samples from the Wisconsin suspects did not match the DNA evidence found on Katie's body, leaving the case still unsolved. 2 men, Neo and Morales, were later found guilty of assaulting a girl in Green Bay, but they were not involved in Katie's case. Neo received a 70-year prison sentence, while Morales got 50 years. This led to another dead end in the investigation. The police were left with only two pieces of evidence: tire tracks from the crime scene and DNA samples from the perpetrator. On December 18, 2006, a significant breakthrough occurred in the investigation when a lab discovered a DNA sample matching the one found on Katie's body. The DNA belonged to 26-year-old Gabriel Avila, a married father with a lengthy criminal record. Notably, Avila had been released from prison shortly before Katie's murder, and he had no prior connection to her. Just 3 months after Katie's brutal murder, Avila was arrested on November 13, 2003, for breaking into the apartment of two young women while wielding a knife. They managed to protect themselves by locking themselves in the bathroom and calling 911. Avila was subsequently convicted of aggravated burglary with intent to commit aggravated assault in March 2004. However, Avila was released on bond and promptly became a fugitive. Unfortunately, the system's flaws delayed his connection to Katie's death by 3.5 years. Avila evaded authorities for nearly a year before being apprehended in November 2004, thanks to a tip. He could have been arrested as early as 3 months after Katie's attack, but the imperfections in the system allowed him to remain at large. Avila was sentenced to 9 years in prison, but it wasn't until 2 years into his sentence that a DNA sample was finally tested. The results showed a partial match with DNA evidence found at Katie's crime scene, prompting investigators to take swift action. They quickly located the truck Avila had used to dump Katie's body and found a ring belonging to Katie in the center console. The detectives investigating Katie's case visited Avila in prison after discovering Katie's ring in his truck. Avila confessed to the crime, explaining that he had been in the area that night to buy illegal substances while his wife was away. He claimed to have seen Katie and offered her a ride, which she declined. Later, Avila encountered Katie again in front of her house. He claimed to have stopped and offered to help her, saying she was unable to get into her house because she didn't have her purse. Katie had planned to enter her bedroom through the window, but Avila attacked her, undressed her, and committed the crime. Avila removed Katie's clothes and then, fearing she would identify him, decided to strangle her. During the struggle, he grabbed her throat and found himself unable to let go. After killing her, Avila placed her body in his pickup truck and drove to a desert landfill where he dumped her body. Avila attempted to destroy evidence by setting Katie's body on fire, but this failed. A DNA sample was later taken from Avila and matched with evidence found on Katie's body in 2003. At the time, however, it was illegal in most states, including New Mexico, to take DNA samples from those arrested. DNA was only entered into the system after a conviction and subsequent imprisonment. This led Katie's parents to campaign for a law that would require those arrested for violent crimes to submit a DNA sample, which would then be added to the national database. They fought to have this law, named after their daughter, passed in all 50 states. Katie's Law, which was passed in New Mexico in 2006 with near-unanimous support, allows for the collection of DNA samples from individuals arrested for certain crimes. Thanks to the persistent efforts of Katie's parents, the law was made federal in 2010 and has since been adopted by over 31 states. The trial of Gabriel Avila started in 2017. During the trial, Avila apologized to Katie's family and expressed remorse. However, his lawyer asked the judge to be lenient, stating that Avila had shown remorse. On the other hand, District Attorney Susana Martinez argued that Avila only confessed after being confronted with DNA evidence more than 3 years after the crime. At the sentencing, Katie's father, David, begged the judge not to show leniency. He passionately argued that since they would never get to see their daughter again, Avila shouldn't be allowed to experience freedom again. In May 2007, Gabriel Avila was found guilty and sentenced to 69 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2043 after serving 30 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. the case of Amanda Plass. Amanda Lynn Plass was born on December 11, 1990, in Choppy, Massachusetts, where she grew up with her sister Emily and brother Nicholas. Her mother, Michelle Myers, described Amanda as a free-spirited individual who often seemed out of place in the present time. In 2011, Amanda was working as a waitress at a local restaurant in Choppy and was in a relationship with a 27-year-old carpenter named Seth Green. Tragedy struck on August 26, 2011. Seth called 911 and reported that he had found Amanda lying unresponsive in the kitchen of her apartment. When police and paramedics arrived, they found that Amanda was already deceased from multiple stab wounds to her chest, throat, and abdomen. The scene was immediately cordoned off and investigations were initiated. Seth was found sitting on the porch, visibly distressed and emotional. Detectives carefully searched Amanda's apartment for evidence, but the perpetrator had managed to escape the scene. The investigation was ongoing, with the goal of identifying the person responsible for Amanda's murder and bringing them to justice. Detectives began their investigation at the crime scene, where they found a significant amount of blood splatter in the kitchen, indicating that this was where the attack occurred. The evidence suggested that a knife was the likely murder weapon, and it was taken by the perpetrator. Further analysis revealed visible shoe prints from Nike sneakers on the floor and broken window glass, bearing a palm print in one of the rooms. Given the type and number of wounds on Amanda's body, detectives suspected that the perpetrator was someone Amanda knew, and the motive was likely a personal vendetta. As a result, they brought Amanda's boyfriend, Seth Green, in for questioning at the police station. When Seth arrived at the police station, he appeared visibly shaken, overcome with emotion over the loss of his girlfriend. The investigators were interested in determining his emotional response. During the interrogation, Seth explained that he had spent the entire day at work and had planned to give Amanda a ride to her workplace, but was unable to do so due to his own work schedule. Seth had a limited relationship with Amanda, but he loved her and had no motive to harm her. As a carpenter, Seth used various tools at work, including a knife on his tool belt. However, he consistently left his tools at work after his shift, and this day was no exception. After finishing his work, Seth changed his clothes, left his tools behind, and went to meet Amanda. He understood why he was the main suspect, but he denied any involvement in her death. The police investigation confirmed Seth's alibi, and he passed a polygraph test. Additionally, the boots he was wearing when the police arrived didn't match the Nike sneakers found at the crime scene, further ruling out his involvement. Amanda's tragic death led to a complex investigation. Initially, the police explored the possibility that her ex-boyfriend was involved, but further inquiry ruled him out as a suspect. He provided a DNA sample and fingerprints, which did not match the evidence found at the crime scene. Moreover, he had a solid alibi, eliminating him from the list of potential perpetrators. The family's pain deepened when they found out that some police officers had taken photos of Amanda's body while the state police were on their way to the crime scene. These officers shared the disturbing images with other officers and civilians, breaking the family's trust with the authorities and adding to their emotional pain. The case remained stagnant for approximately 2 years until investigators decided to review the evidence again. During this review, a crucial clue was discovered on a dry erase board in Amanda's bedroom. The message, "Dennis was here 8/11, had gone unnoticed until then. Considering the date, this message became significant. It was just 15 days before Amanda's body was discovered in her apartment. The revelation sparked questions. Who was Dennis, and was he connected to Amanda's death? The police had not come across this name throughout the entire investigation. Detectives analyzed Amanda's phone records and social media posts to see if she had any connections to someone named Dennis. Amanda's ex-boyfriend reported to the police that her apartment had been broken into several times when she was not home. Amanda suspected a young man whose name started with the letter D. She knew this man and wanted to resolve the issue peacefully, so she decided to talk to him first. During their meeting, Amanda tried to discuss the break-ins, but the man denied any involvement. When Amanda mentioned that a neighbor had seen him in her apartment, she politely asked him to return her stolen belongings. However, the man left. The investigation then focused on identifying the man named Dennis, who was suspected of being involved in Amanda's death. The police found a man named Dennis Rosa Roman living 3 blocks from the scene of the crime. A background check revealed that Dennis had a history of breaking and entering. Although there was no palm print to match the one found at Amanda's home, the police still wanted to question Dennis. They located him in Westfield, Massachusetts, and invited him to the station for an informal conversation. However, Dennis declined the invitation. But in November 2013, Dennis voluntarily visited the police station. The police questioned Dennis about his relationship with Amanda, and he acknowledged knowing her from Chappie, but claimed he hadn't seen her in a couple of years, which was true since Amanda had been deceased for a couple of years. When asked if he had ever visited Amanda's apartment, Dennis denied ever being there and stated that he didn't know her well. He admitted to occasionally selling weed to Amanda, which was how they occasionally interacted. During the interrogation, Dennis agreed to provide a DNA swab and revealed the size of his shoes, which matched the one found at the crime scene. However, the police noted that Dennis's Nike Air Max shoes had a different tread pattern than the ones that left bloody tracks at the crime scene. After providing his DNA, Dennis refused to answer further questions, promising to return to the police station in a few days to continue the conversation. Initially, the police didn't have sufficient grounds to arrest Dennison, so he was released. This decision was made despite concerns that he might flee and hinder the investigation. Further investigation revealed that Amanda and Dennis had made several phone calls to each other on July 28, 2011. The phone records showed that Amanda initiated 4 calls, while Dennis initiated 5 calls. When Dennis returned to the police station a few days later, his story changed. He now claimed that he had communicated with Amanda about break-ins at her apartment when she wasn't home. Amanda didn't report the incidents because nothing of value was stolen. The investigators found this story unconvincing, particularly since they had heard about the alleged break-ins multiple times before. Their suspicions grew, and they strongly suspected that Dennis was actually the person responsible for breaking into Amanda's apartment. As Rosa Roman continued to alter his initial statement, the investigators became more confident that he was hiding something crucial to the case. The priority shifted to uncovering the truth about his involvement in Amanda's death and determining what secrets he was trying to conceal. When investigators showed Dennis a photo of a dry erase board with the message, "Dennis was here," on August 11, 2011, he initially admitted to writing it, contradicting his previous statement that he had never entered Amanda's apartment. This admission was significant, as it directly implicated him in the crime. Furthermore, DNA results confirmed that Dennis had given false testimony, as his DNA matched the DNA found under Amanda's fingernails, and his palm print was found on a glass at the crime scene. After realizing that the police had gathered sufficient evidence for his arrest, Dennis changed his story for the 3rd time. He now claimed that he had been present at the crime scene and had attempted to save Amanda from the attacker. However, he refused to name the alleged attacker, citing concerns for his and his family's safety. Instead, he provided a detailed description of the person he claimed was responsible for Amanda's death. Dennis described the alleged attacker as a tall, white, light-skinned individual with blue eyes, weighing between 170 and 200 pounds. He also claimed that the person was wearing old pants, dirty boots, and a t-shirt with the phrase, "Why drink and drive when you can smoke and fly?" Despite this new information, detectives did not believe Dennis's story, as all the evidence pointed to him as the sole perpetrator of the crime. As a result, Dennis was arrested and charged with Amanda's murder. The trial took place almost 3 years after Amanda's death and centered around the debate over whether Dennis was responsible for her murder. His lawyers presented the argument that although Dennis was at the crime scene, he did not commit the murder. Instead, they accused the police of botching the investigation and framing Dennis after their efforts to find the perpetrator failed. Dennis claimed that his involvement in Amanda's death was involuntary. He stated that his dealer forced him to collect a debt at her apartment. Dennis allegedly tried to help Amanda, but couldn't stop the dealer. He cited his DNA under her nails as evidence, saying she grabbed his hand during the incident. In contrast, the prosecutors had a different explanation for the events leading to Amanda's death. They believed that Dennis was breaking into Amanda's apartment while she was not home and that she had caught him. During one of these break-ins, Dennis allegedly left an inscription with his name on a board. Amanda assumed that Dennis was the trespasser who had stolen from her, and that is why she called him and asked him to return the stolen items. This explained the multiple phone calls between Amanda and Dennis on the day she died. Dennis, the killer of Amanda, mistakenly believed Amanda was already at work, re-entered her apartment, and ultimately took her life in a fit of anger during a dispute. A jury convicted Dennis of the crime after 8 days of testimony and 5 hours of deliberation. Dennis received a life sentence in prison with no possible friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sierra Breland. Sierra LaClaire, a cheerful and ambitious woman from Cleveland, Georgia, grew up with a dream to live in Atlanta one day. To achieve her goal, she had to leave her home state and pursue higher education. She attended the University of Tennessee for her undergraduate degree and then earned her law degree from Florida State University. Sierra became a successful lawyer, specializing in insurance defense. According to her mother, Kelly, Sierra was an energetic person who overcame obstacles to achieve her goals. She was happy, loving, and dedicated to her career. In October 2020, Sierra met Xavier Breland on Tinder, and their relationship quickly blossomed. They got married just 6 months later, and Sierra soon became pregnant. During this time, she provided legal assistance to Xavier in his dispute with his ex-wife. They decided to start a new life in Carmel, Indiana, where Sierra secured a job at a law firm. At the end of 2021, she gave birth to a son, whom they named Jackson. Xavier and Sierra appeared to be a perfect couple from the outside, but their relationship was troubled from the start. According to Shelby Campbell, Sierra's best friend, problems began to surface shortly after they started dating. Sierra had initially tried to end things with Xavier, but he refused to accept rejection. He showed up uninvited at her apartment and sent threatening messages when he saw her with another man. Sierra gave Xavier another chance, and they married 6 months later. However, Sierra confided in Shelby about her growing fears and concerns about her husband's behavior. In one text message, Sierra expressed her feelings of being torn between her love for Xavier and her fear of his increasingly bad behavior. She worried about their future together, citing his lack of remorse for his actions and his tendency to blame her for his behavior. Their text exchanges, which Shelby shared, demonstrate the depth of Sierra's fear. On multiple occasions, Sierra called the police out of desperation, but by the time they arrived, Sierra would downplay the situation, fearing the consequences of speaking out against her husband. This cycle repeated itself in both Georgia and Indiana, where the police were called to their residence multiple times. Sierra's parents, Kelly and Nick Lair, were aware that her home life with Xavier was troubled. They encouraged her to end the relationship, reassuring her that she could always return to the safety of her family home. Sierra's journey to Georgia began when she and Xavier embarked on the 11-hour drive south. Sierra arrived at her parents' house on February 19th, where she spent the night with relatives she hadn't seen since moving to Indiana. Sierra planned the trip to visit her family in Georgia, secretly intending to stay and divorce her husband Xavier due to escalating abuse. She told her parents about her plans and the abuse, and they supported her decision. On February 19th, Sierra arrived at her parents' house in Cleveland, Georgia, and reaffirmed her decision to divorce Xavier. The next day, she left to pick up her son Jackson from her mother-in-law's house in Johns Creek, Georgia. Sierra sent a text message to her best friend saying that she was waiting to pick up Jackson, but Xavier was refusing to hand him over to her. On February 21st, Sierra texted Nick, her father, saying she'd return home the next morning, and he gave her permission. When her father didn't hear back the next day, he reached out, and Sierra replied that everything was fine, just that she was feeling under the weather. Nick texted Sierra on Wednesday and Thursday, but she didn't respond. By Friday, her family was worried. On Saturday, Nick received a call from an Indiana police officer who said Sierra was missing and her husband had filed a report. The family was shocked, wondering why Sierra hadn't told them she was in Indiana. Nick called Xavier's father. He denied seeing Sierra, but it was later revealed that Xavier had reported her missing to the Carmel Police Department on February 26, 2022. Video footage showed her last known location was her mother-in-law's home in Georgia on February 24th. Sierra disappeared on February 25th after leaving her Carmel home to walk to a store around 1 p.m. She was last seen wearing a black top and purple shorts, despite the low temperature. However, she never arrived at the store and left behind her personal belongings, including 3 phones and her 5-month-old son. The family finds it suspicious as Sierra had a burner phone for emergencies and wouldn't leave her baby behind. Kelly, Sierra's mother, said Sierra confided in her about the couple's financial struggles and alleged her son-in-law was physically and emotionally abusive. When Sierra went missing, leaving her baby behind, Kelly feared the worst. Kelly described Sierra as a loving mom who prioritized her son's care. When Sierra vanished without the baby, her husband's alibi seemed suspicious. 2 days later, police visited Xavier, Sierra's husband, after an accidental gunshot at his home. His criminal past, including a 2005 felony conviction, raised suspicions. Xavier was named a person of interest in his wife Sierra's disappearance and arrested on an unrelated charge. He had an outstanding warrant for aggravated stalking in Qua County, where he had tracked his ex-wife using a GPS device in their children's stuffed animal. 2 weeks after Sierra's disappearance, police, volunteers, family, and friends searched neighborhoods in Johns Creek, focusing on areas along Medlock Bridge Road. They passed out flyers and set up electronic signs asking for the public's help, and contacted companies to display Sierra's information across Metro Atlanta. The family of Sierra sought information on her disappearance, specifically regarding the white 2017 Volkswagen Tiguan. During the investigation, Xavier, Sierra's husband, was the only person seen getting out of the car at gas stations and shops. Law enforcement officials searched the mother-in-law's house, collecting evidence with a search warrant, and forensic professionals and cadavered dogs to look for signs of a struggle or potential blood stains. A search of Xavier Breland's residence by authorities, including a K-9 unit, found no trail. A video from March 2022 shows Xavier telling his children that Sierra was kidnapped and won't be coming home, contradicting his previous statement to police. The video was obtained while Xavier was in jail for aggravated stalking, unrelated to Sierra's disappearance. In August 2022, Xavier was found not guilty, but he was quickly arrested again and extradited to Indiana to face a new charge, unlawful possession of a firearm by a serious violent felon. At his initial hearing, Xavier asked the judge to reduce his bail to an amount his mother could afford. The judge set the bail at $35,000, lower than the $50,000 requested by prosecutors. Xavier promised the judge that he would turn his life around if released, even offering to get a job as a truck driver. Despite Xavier's plea, the judge ultimately set the bail at $100,000. Xavier was eventually released in February 2023 after posting bail. However, this decision would have consequences that will be discussed later. Xavier was repeatedly questioned about Ciara Brain's disappearance, but he maintained his innocence, claiming she vanished after going to the store. He stuck to this story, denying any involvement in her disappearance. The search for evidence in Ciara Brain's disappearance is a daunting task, considering the vast areas of land that need to be searched. Court documents revealed that some items were taken from Xavier's mom's home. Crime scene investigators removed the carpet and mattress from the home on April 21, 2022. After Xavier's arrest on March 1, 5-month-old Jackson was taken into state care. Ciara's parents, Nick and Kelly, are now able to be with their newborn grandchildren and are working to bring the infant back home to Georgia. Despite Ciara remains missing. Over the past year, multiple searches have been conducted, focusing on specific areas, but sadly, no leads have been found. Xavier Breland is the only person of interest named in Ciara's disappearance, but no charges have been brought against him. Her family believes he knows what happened to her and is the only one who can give them answers. Kelly LeClaire thinks Ciara's body could be in Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, or Indiana and is asking outdoor enthusiasts to be on the lookout. Ciara's parents now have custody of the couple's child. Xavier was released on bail for an unrelated firearms case, but failed to appear in court and a warrant has been issued for his arrest. The FBI is now involved in the case, and the search for Ciara and Xavier continues. The disappearance of both Ciara and Xavier has raised many unanswered questions. Ciara's mother believes Ciara feared Xavier and didn't plan to return to Indiana with him. With both missing, the case is now more urgent. The trial for Xavier's gun charge has been postponed, and authorities and Ciara's family are seeking public help to locate them and shed light on their disappearances. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Augustina M. Winkelried. Augustina M. Winkelried was born on June 6, 2001, in Esperanza, where she grew up in a big. As the baby of the family, she naturally received extra attention and affection. People who knew her described her as outgoing, kind-hearted, and always wearing a bright smile. On January 12, 2019, Augustina's father drove her to a friend's house, where a group of about 6 friends were meeting up. They planned to go to Teo's, a nightclub with a bowling alley, later that night. Augustina had already made plans to sleep over at her friend's house, and her father knew about these plans. Augustina left a club in the afternoon and went home. Later that night, she asked her boyfriend Noel to join her at the club, but he declined, saying he was tired. Augustina and her friends had a great time at the club, dancing and enjoying the music until 5 a.m., when they decided to leave. However, she ran into another group of friends and decided to stay longer. At 5:40 a.m., a surveillance camera showed Augustina leaving the club, carrying her phone. She then went to a nearby fast food stand, where she waited in line, got her order, and chatted briefly with someone she knew. After that, she headed towards the road. Since the friend's house where she was staying the night was close by, Augustina decided to walk. It was getting light, and she didn't seem concerned about her safety. There were no sidewalks, so she walked along the side of the road. Augustina's whereabouts on the night in question are unclear, but video footage shows she walked steadily despite wearing high-heeled platform shoes. The only moment of instability was when she approached the driveway, which is understandable given that it's an unpaved road with rocks. However, Augustina failed to arrive at her friend's house or her own home, which was unusual because she always kept her parents informed of her location. But on this occasion, when morning came, her parents didn't receive a text from her saying she had arrived safely. Concerned, Augustina's father, Daniel and Vincel Reed, contacted the police and began searching for his daughter on his own. After starting their investigation, police officers went to Teos's club to interview potential witnesses and review the available surveillance footage, since they knew Augustina had spent the entire night there. Meanwhile, a friend of Augustina's, Brian, reached out to her father, Daniel, and told him that he had seen Augustina outside Teos's club around 6 a.m. Brian was driving by when he noticed Augustina standing on the side of the road, talking to the driver of a silver car that had pulled over next to her. Brian continued driving down the road, but quickly pulled out his phone and called Augustina to check on her. He asked if she was all right and if she needed a ride home. Augustina replied that she was fine. Augustina accepted Brian's offer for a ride, saying she was headed to a friend's house. Brian decided to wait for her at a nearby gas station, which was just a few hundred meters away from where he first spotted her. He would fill up his car while waiting. However, 15 minutes passed, and Augustina failed to appear at the gas station. Brian then went to look for her, but she was nowhere to be found. Despite trying to contact her, Brian was unsuccessful as Augustina did not answer her phone. At the time, Brian didn't think much of it, assuming that Augustina had simply gone straight to her friend's house and forgotten that he was waiting. The main clue in this situation was the silver car. Although Brian couldn't identify the exact brand and model, he described it as fairly old. The man in the driver's seat may have been the last person to see Augustina before she disappeared. Police didn't rule out the possibility that he was involved in her disappearance. They tracked her cell phone signal and found that the last recorded signal was from a tower near the Taos Club. The search team focused on the vacant lots and fields around the club, which is on the outskirts of town. A nearby gas station was the only business with surveillance cameras along the road Augustina was walking on. Daniel, Augustina's father, reviewed the footage to see if his daughter had passed by the gas station. Since her friend's house was nearby, it's likely that Augustina would have walked past the gas station. The attendant showed Daniel the footage after he explained the situation and asked for help. The camera had recorded footage from that morning, but the attendant almost lost his job as a result. Later, the gas station owner fired the employee for letting someone watch the security footage without permission. However, when the townspeople found out, they boycotted the gas station, which led the owner to rehire the employee and apologize. Daniel reviewed the gas station's footage and couldn't find his daughter on it. It seemed Augustina never made it there. But the footage did show an old silver car, the same one Brian had described earlier, passing by the gas station around the time Augustina was walking on the road. The car was a Renault, and Daniel identified its owner as Pablo Trianfini, a 39-year-old garbage collector who lived nearby. Pablo had no prior convictions but had been on the police's radar several times. The first incident occurred in 2017 when Trianfini's ex-wife reported him to the police for physical abuse, leading to a court order that banned him from approaching her. He was arrested again in the same year for violating this order. After reviewing the surveillance footage, the police identified the silver car. However, upon learning that Daniel had already seen the video, they worried that a violent attack might occur and rushed to Pablo Trianfini's residence. When they arrived, they found a crowd gathered outside, shouting, "Where is Augustina?" The crowd dispersed after the police arrived, and someone informed the officers that Trianfini was inside the house. Trianfini had peeked out, but upon seeing the hostile crowd, he retreated back inside and locked the door. The police did not have sufficient reason to forcibly enter the house, so they requested a search warrant. While waiting for the search warrant, the police cordoned off the house to prevent Trianfini from escaping. Around midnight, an officer checked the yard and discovered that Pablo Trianfini had died. The officer rushed to assist, but it was too late, and Trianfini was deceased. Such a turn of events made Pablo Trianfini's involvement in Agostina's disappearance clear. However, after searching his house and car, the police still found no evidence. Trianfini attempted to deflect further suspicion by using a rope, but its purpose was unclear. As the police searched Trianfini's house, his neighbor approached them. The neighbor stated that earlier that day, Pablo had borrowed a shovel, claiming he needed to dig for earthworms for a fishing trip. About 30 minutes later, Trianfini returned the shovel and made a comment that struck his neighbor as odd. He thanked the neighbor and said, "Thank you, I don't know if I'll ever see you again." Witnesses reported seeing Trianfini leave his house multiple times on Sunday, riding his bicycle while carrying a shovel. This behavior suggested that Agostina might no longer be alive. On Monday, January 14, 2019, a search operation began at dawn, aided by drones and police dogs. At 9:15 a.m., Agostina's partially clothed body was found approximately 500 meters away from Taos Club, hidden in a ditch with dense vegetation. The forensic investigation revealed that Agostina had fiercely defended herself, resulting in defensive wounds on her hands and her attacker's skin under her fingernails. DNA analysis confirmed that Pablo Trianfini was the perpetrator. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation. The circumstances surrounding Agostina's entry into Trianfini's car remain unclear. It is unknown whether she was coerced or accepted a ride voluntarily. With both parties now unable to share their accounts, the truth may never be fully known. A search of Trianfini's phone did not yield any evidence of prior communication or Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nicole Lenway. Nicole Lenway, also known as Nikki, was born on July 11, 1989, in a small town in northern Minnesota. Unfortunately, there is limited information available about her parents and early life. It is reported that her father left the family at a young age, leaving her mother to raise her alone and work hard to provide a good education. Nikki excelled academically and was a skilled athlete, particularly in track and field and martial arts. During her final years of high school, she decided to pursue a career in law enforcement to fight crime. She studied hard and trained physically to meet the admission requirements for the police academy. After graduating from high school with honors, Nikki enrolled in the police academy and relocated from her small hometown to Minneapolis in 2010. Nikki was hired as an assistant investigator at the Minneapolis Police Headquarters Criminal Investigation Department, where she worked diligently for several years before being promoted to investigator. Her colleagues praised her as a driven, results-focused woman and a fearless officer who was willing to take risks. However, in her personal life, Nikki unknowingly became entangled with a skilled manipulator. Nikki's ill-fated relationship began in 2012 at a Taekwondo competition, where she met Timothy, a coach and martial arts expert who was 8 years her senior. Initially, Timothy didn't make a strong impression on Nikki, but she caught his attention with her striking beauty, long hair, and charming smile. Notably, Timothy had a reputation as a ladies' man, with a history of frequent romantic partners and a tendency to date multiple women simultaneously. Timothy was confident in his ability to win over women he was interested in and wasn't used to being rejected. After finding out that Nikki lived in Minneapolis, he discovered where she worked out and got her phone number. Initially, he offered to be her personal trainer, but soon he started pursuing a romantic relationship with her. Nikki was quickly drawn to Timothy's kind, open, and charming personality, and she developed strong feelings for him. Before long, she found herself deeply in love with him. Their romantic relationship began, and they started dating. At first, the man was charming, attentive, and made a point to show he was dependable. Timothy had a strong presence, was intelligent, and had a persuasive way with words that often dominated the women he was with. As the relationship progressed quickly, after a month and a half, they decided to move in together. The first 6 months were wonderful, and Nikki felt happy and loved living with Timothy. She opened up to him, trusting him completely, believing they had no secrets between them. However, over time, Timothy's behavior started to change, revealing his true nature. At first, the changes were subtle, and Nikki didn't notice anything out of the ordinary for a while. Timothy, a charming and muscular man, was always proud of his success with women. Despite being in a serious relationship with Nicole, he continued to flirt with other women, often in her presence, which hurt and humiliated her. At first, Nikki hoped that Timothy would eventually change his ways and settle down, but as time passed, nothing changed. Timothy reassured her of his love and was passionate and tender as a partner, but outside of their relationship, he continued to flirt with other women and was known to have affairs. Nikki's jealousy started to get on his nerves, and he began lashing out at her. He would tell her that he could do what he wanted and she had no right to control him. Despite this, he would later apologize and reassure her that no one could ever love her as much as he did. Nikki would forgive him, and they would continue making plans for their future. Timothy and Nikki's relationship turned dark in fall 2014. During an argument, Timothy grabbed Nikki's throat, but released her just before she lost consciousness. He then pushed her, causing her to fall and hit a wall. The incident made Nikki realize the relationship was toxic, but her emotional attachment kept her from leaving. She eventually forgave him after he apologized. During the course of their relationship, several disturbing characteristics of Timothy became apparent. Most troubling was his intense jealousy and fixation on controlling his partner's every move. He frequently checked her phone without her consent, scrutinizing her calls, messages, contacts, and social media activity, and kept a record of her conversations and whereabouts. This pattern of behavior continued for years. Timothy was prone to irrational outbursts, unjustly accusing his partner of infidelity, while he himself was unfaithful. He would often resort to physical violence, yet managed to convince his partner that no one else could ever love her as much as he did. If she threatened to leave the relationship, Timothy claiming that he would take his own life and that she would be responsible for his death. In November 2015, Nikki decided to leave the house after another violent argument with Timothy. She packed her bags and attempted to walk out, but Timothy chased after her. He grabbed her by the hair and dragged her back into the house, but Nikki's screams and struggles attracted the attention of their neighbors. Realizing he couldn't control the situation, Timothy let her go. Although Nikki was finally free from the violence, her ordeal was not over. After years of being in abusive and manipulative relationships, she was in a vulnerable state. However, Timothy had no intention of giving up. Instead of resorting to threats, he switched to romantic gestures to win her back. He would meet her after work, send her flowers, and send her messages filled with affection, begging for another chance to start over. Nikki had been resolute in her decision to leave her ex-boyfriend and had no intention of going back to him. However, in December of the same year, she discovered she was pregnant. Although this was not part of her plan, she never considered abortion the baby. She was aware that if her ex-boyfriend found out about the pregnancy, he would try to use it to manipulate her into getting back together. To avoid this, Nikki attempted to keep her pregnancy a secret, but it was eventually revealed to him through their mutual friends and acquaintances by January 2016. Once Timothy found out, he immediately contacted Nikki, claiming that their child should be raised in a complete, and urged her to reconsider their relationship and come back to him. Nikki, who had grown up without a father, knew firsthand how difficult it would be to raise a child solo, but she also understood that staying with someone manipulative, cruel, and uncaring would be detrimental to their child's well-being. Although she still had feelings for Timothy, she refused to get back together with him. However, she was willing to let him be a part of their child's life. On June 20, 2016, Nikki gave birth to a healthy baby boy named Callahan Amer, and Timothy acknowledged paternity of the child, expressing his desire to co-parent. However, it soon became apparent that giving the baby his surname and registering him as the father was not the best decision. Timothy promises to be a responsible and caring parent, along with his pleas for they to reunite for the sake of their child, rang hollow. In reality, Timothy had no genuine interest in his son. He had hoped to use the child as a way to control his ex-girlfriend, Nikki, but she was no longer susceptible to his manipulation. As a result, Timothy quickly lost interest in the baby. Nikki, on the other hand, took a year-long maternity leave and dedicated herself fully to caring for her son. She didn't even consider starting new relationships, completely immersing herself in motherhood. Meanwhile, Timothy continued his carefree lifestyle, juggling numerous casual lovers and connections. In 2016, Timothy, a 36-year-old mentor and coach, started living with his 18-year-old girl student, Colin. He had been training Colin since she was 14, and over time, she had developed strong romantic feelings for him, despite their 18-year age gap. At first, they kept their relationship private, telling others that Colin was just a tenant in Timothy's home. However, it soon became apparent to those around them that a romantic relationship was developing between them. Timothy was happy with Colin, and friends observed that Colin was deeply committed to Timothy, often displaying a youthful eagerness to please him. In the summer of 2017, Nikki returned to work earlier than expected. As a single mother, she had no other choice. The child's father was not providing adequate support, and she was struggling financially. At the time, Nikki was a forensic expert at the Minneapolis Police Headquarters, where her work schedule was often unpredictable. Callahan attended daycare during the day, but when Nikki was held up at work or received an unexpected call, she would ask Timothy to watch her son. She allowed her current lover, Timothy, to take care of her child from a previous relationship for a couple of reasons. 1, she wanted the child to have a positive relationship with his father, who had recently promised to be more involved. 2, since her ex-partner wasn't contributing financially, she hoped that by Timothy watching the child, he could save her money on childcare. However, the situation worked out differently than expected. Timothy did not enjoy spending time with the child. It was a burden to him, and he was unwilling to take on the responsibility. Thus, he shifted it along with all related troubles onto his young lover, Colin. In the end, Colin took a liking to the little boy and was happy to take care of him. But what happened next was surprising. Timothy turned the situation around, making Nikki feel responsible for caring for the child by saying that Nikki was irresponsible and trying to offload her parenting duties onto them. In the spring of 2017, Nikki started a new romantic relationship with Donovan Ford, a fellow police officer. Donovan was kind and caring towards Nikki and her son Callahan, and he was even willing to adopt the boy. For a while, everything seemed perfect. However, when Timothy, Nikki's ex, found out about the new relationship, he became enraged. Despite having no interest in rekindling things with Nikki and having little involvement in his son's life, Timothy was furious that Nikki had moved on and was happy. This sparked a desire to sabotage her new relationships and cause trouble. Timothy decided to use their son, Callahan, and Colin, who was naive and trusting, to further his own malicious goals. The Timothy consistently contacted social services to report concerns that Donovan was physically and emotionally abusing their son and that Nikki was failing to intervene. As a result, Child Protective Services frequently investigated the family. Although no evidence of abuse was ever found, Nikki and Donovan were repeatedly questioned. They was feeling unfairly targeted. They were aware of who was behind the accusations, but felt powerless to stop the cycle of investigations that continued for years. Meanwhile, Timothy continued to manipulate Colin, convincing her that Callahan was in grave danger, that Nikki and Donovan were cruel to him, and that they might one day harm him. Colin believed that Timothy genuinely cared for the boy who had grown up before her eyes and was willing to protect him. Timothy persistently intimidated and threatened his Nikki and Timothy, going so far as to file false police reports. When Donovan attempted to reason with him, Timothy refused to back down, continuing to make life unbearable for Nikki and Donovan. Timothy escalated the situation by taking his ex-girlfriend to court, seeking sole custody of their young son, Tim. Nikki was caught off guard and felt vulnerable, knowing her ex's history of dishonesty and manipulation. She believed that Timothy's true intention was not to care for their son, but to punish her for moving on and finding happiness with Donovan. Nikki decided to seek a restraining order against Timothy, citing his unstable behavior and the threat he posed to her. Although she was confident of winning custody of their child, she anticipated a long and arduous legal battle ahead, knowing Timothy would not give up easily. In the meantime, Timothy continued to wreak havoc on his ex-girlfriend's life, spinning elaborate lies. He even fabricated a story about Nikki attempting to harm him, claiming she had tried to hit him with her car. He alleged that he narrowly escaped by jumping out of the way and that she had only run over his foot. However, when he took this false accusation to court, it quickly fell apart due to lack of evidence. In September 2022, the custody case went to trial. Timothy made false accusations against Nikki, claiming she was harming their child. Furthermore, Timothy attempted to manipulate their child, Callahan, into saying that his mother and Donovan were physically abusing him. He even offered the child treats in exchange for lying. However, Callahan refused to lie and instead revealed that his father was pressuring him to make false statements. The court considered Callahan's testimony and ultimately awarded sole custody to Nikki. Although Nikki was relieved, Timothy continued to fight the decision and filed an appeal. Initially, he was granted supervised visitation with Callahan once a week, with Nikki present. Later, the court allowed Timothy to spend time alone with Callahan without Nikki's supervision, which greatly distressed and frightened her. On April 19, 2022, a shocking incident occurred when Nikki went to the family center to pick up her son. As she parked and approached the entrance, a person wearing a black hoodie, mask, and clothing approached her. This individual, whose identity remains unknown, pulled out a gun and shot Nikki 4 times at close range before fleeing in a black pickup truck in an unknown direction. Nikki miraculously remained conscious after being shot, and she even managed to call emergency services. However, she was unable to communicate with the dispatcher because one of the bullets had damaged her vocal cords, leaving her only able to make gurgling sounds. A bystander, who had witnessed the shooting, happened to be passing by and rushed to Nikki's aid. The bystander had seen the shooter flee the scene in a vehicle and had made sure it was safe before approaching the victim. The bystander, who called 911, she told the dispatcher what had happened, gave them the address, and applied pressure to Nikki's wounds to stop the bleeding. This quick thinking likely saved Nikki's life. Nikki spent several days in a coma, fighting for her life. She had lost a lot of blood and her vital organs were damaged, but doctors were able to stabilize her condition. Nikki was extremely fortunate to have survived. Medical professionals were amazed that she had escaped death by mere millimeters. Now that Nikki was on the road to recovery, the focus shifted to identifying who had tried to kill her. Nikki, the victim, was certain that her ex-lover, Timothy, was the one who had shot her. She immediately reported this to the police as soon as she regained consciousness. Her friend Donovan also told the police that Nikki had no other enemies besides Timothy. However, during the investigation, Timothy had a solid alibi. He was at the family center with his son at the time of the shooting, which was confirmed by the staff and security footage. Nikki was certain that Timothy was behind the attempt on her life. The investigation uncovered some key evidence at the scene for shell casings and a suspicious black Dodge Ram pickup truck with no license plates that was caught on camera running a red light at a nearby intersection. Significantly, this vehicle matched the description given by a witness who had potentially saved Nikki's life. As a result, authorities decided to investigate the vehicles owned by Timothy. During a further interrogation, Timothy revealed that he owned a Chevrolet Traverse SUV and a Dodge Challenger, but he denied ever owning a pickup truck. The investigation revealed that the man was dishonest, and a black Dodge Ram matching the shooter's vehicle was registered in his name. Timothy was arrested for further questioning once the truth came to light. When shown the surveillance footage, he acknowledged owning a similar vehicle but claimed it was rarely used and mostly remained stationary. Timothy also mentioned that his pickup had distinctive stickers on the doors and hood. This was confirmed, but the stickers appeared to have been recently applied. Despite this, the evidence was circumstantial, and law enforcement still needed to find the weapon and the actual shooter to fully close the case. An investigation revealed that Timothy's vehicle had a satellite navigation system, allowing authorities to track its route on the day in question. The car was parked at the back entrance of a Tando school on the evening of April 18th, remaining there overnight and most of the next day. Review of road cameras showed that the vehicle arrived at the school with license plates, but left without them the following evening. Footage also captured a person of short stature and slight build, with a feminine silhouette, operating the vehicle that day. As a result, police decided to detain and question Colin Larson, Timothy's live-in girlfriend, in connection with the events. A search was conducted at their home, but the weapon used in the crime was not found. However, authorities discovered ammunition with the same caliber as the crime scene. She, fearful and intimidated, quickly began to confess, revealing that Timothy was the mastermind behind the crime. In contrast, Colin, still under Timothy's influence, believed that his actions were justified and that he was trying to protect the child from an abusive mother. Unbeknownst to Colin, Timothy had been manipulating her for years, controlling what she thought and felt, leading her to believe that the child was being mistreated and that Timothy's actions were motivated by a desire to protect him. The trial of the conspirators took place in November of the same year. During the trial, Colin admitted that her lover had given her the gun used in the assassination attempt and had taken it back afterwards, but she claimed not to know what he did with it. The prosecution's case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence, a fact that the defense lawyers highlighted. However, Colin's confession proved to be the decisive factor, as she still struggled to accept that her lover had deceived her and genuinely believed they were committing a just act. The court also took into account the victim's testimony, which described Timothy's character and his history of manipulating the women who loved him. As a result, 42-year-old Timothy Amma was found guilty of orchestrating a first-degree attempted murder, as well as inciting and aiding the crime. He received the maximum sentence of 18 years in prison. Colin Larson, who carried out the attack, was sentenced to 16 years in prison. 1 year after the attempted assassination, Nikki made a full physical and emotional recovery. She and Donovan officially formalized their relationship, and he proved to be an excellent father figure for Callahan. Nikki and Donovan, now a married couple, are expecting their first child together, and the bystander who saved Nikki's life will be the child's godmother. In a related development, Timothy, if he behaves well, will be eligible for parole in 2035. However, as a condition of his parole, he will be required to stay at least 100 meters away from his son, former lover, and her family members, and he will be prohibited from attempting to contact them in any way. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Daniel Wozniak. Sam Herr was born to parents Stephen and Raquel Kalberman on May 29, 1983, in Los Angeles, California. As their only child, Sam Herr was showered with love and attention from his parents, his father being a special education teacher and his mother a stay-at-home parent. Sam Herr maintained a close relationship with his parents even after he moved away. Despite his physically imposing stature, Sam Hare's friends affectionately referred to him as a gentle giant, describing him as a fun-loving and laid-back individual. Sam Hare enlisted in the United States Army at a young age and completed tours of duty in Afghanistan and Germany as part of the 173rd Airborne. After serving for 3 years, he was honorably discharged and returned to Southern California to pursue higher education using the GI Bill. His goal was to complete college and then re-enlist in the Army as an officer. To achieve this, Sam enrolled in Orange Coast Community College, where he befriended Julie Kibushi, who was 3 years his junior. However, Sam Hare struggled with the emotional aftermath of his military service, ultimately developing post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, a common affliction among veterans. When 28-year-old Sam Hare failed to visit his parents' house over a weekend as planned, they began to worry. Sam Hare's parents, Stephen and Raquel, became increasingly concerned after several attempts to contact their son went unanswered. Deciding to take matters into their own hands, Stephen went to Sam Hare's apartment in Costa Mesa with his wife to see what was amiss. Their discovery led to immediate panic when they could not find their son and only saw Julie Kibushi in a state of horror. Stephen quickly dialed 911 as Raquel choked and screamed. The moment they realized Julie had met a gruesome end, they knew their lives would never be the same, and the trauma would have a lasting impact. The Costa Mesa community was shocked by the incident, as murders are rare there. At the apartment, police found no signs of a disturbance. The bedroom, however, presented a disturbing scene. On the bedside table, investigators found an unused knife, as well as 2 books, a combat manual and a sex guide. But it was the condition of the bed that was truly horrifying. The bed was soaked in the Julie Kibushi's blood, and the deceased Julie Kibushi was found in a compromising position, partially lying on the bed and partially kneeling on the floor. Her pants had been pulled down, exposing her lower body, leading detectives to suspect that she may have been sexually assaulted before her murder. The autopsy revealed that she had suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head, with 1 bullet entering the top center of her skull. Although a knife was found on the bedside table, it appeared to have been unused. Other unusual details included a tiara on the victim's head and the words, "All yours," scrawled on the back of Julie Kibushi's sweater. Julie Kibushi's handbag was found in the kitchen. The detectives identified the victim as 23-year-old Julie Kibushi, who was born on Valentine's Day in 1987 to a Japanese-American family. She was the first daughter and third of 4 children to parents June and Masa Kibushi. Her parents affectionately called her "my Valentine girl" from a young age. Julie Kibushi developed a passion for tap dancing at the age of 5, which continued to grow throughout her life. Those who knew her described her as a joyful person to be around, with a goofy and bubbly personality that could light up a room. Julie Kibushi was known for her kindness and willingness to go out of her way to help others. Julie Kibushi's life was a balance between her Japanese heritage and her independent American spirit. She had recently graduated from the Orange County School of the Arts and was pursuing a degree in fashion design at Orange Coast Community College. There, she befriended 26-year-old Sam Hare and even tutored him in anthropology. Little did she know, her kindness would ultimately lead to her tragic demise. The police investigation into Julie Kibushi's murder was underway. Detectives meticulously examined the crime scene, searching for clues that would reveal the truth about her final moments. Their attention turned to Sam Hare, as Julie Kibushi's body was found in his apartment. His sudden disappearance further raised suspicions. With evidence pointing to Sam Hare's involvement, investigators decided to take a closer look at him. Detectives suspected that Sam Hare had committed the crime in a moment of passion and then fled. This theory was supported by the fact that Sam Hare was nowhere to be found after the murder of Julie Kibushi in his apartment. The discovery of text messages from Sam Hare's number on Julie Kibushi's phone further fueled their suspicions. Initially, the messages seemed innocuous, with Sam Herr sending Julie Kibushi a text at 2:45 p.m. on May 21, 2010, telling her he would help a friend and then visit his parents. However, just 2 hours later, his messages took a drastic turn as he frantically asked Julie Kibushi to come to his apartment. However, investigators interpreted these messages as evidence of Sam Herr's guilt, arguing that he had planned for Julie Kibushi to visit his apartment, which ultimately led to the murder. The disappearance of several key items from the apartment hinted at Sam Herr's possible flight. His passport and car were both missing, leading investigators to a straightforward conclusion: Sam Herr was on the run and likely the prime suspect in the crime. As the investigation continued, the Costa Mesa police tracked Sam Herr's cell phone and credit card activity to pinpoint his location. They discovered that his credit card had been used for 4 ATM withdrawals and a purchase at a pizza delivery place in Long Beach, California, just 20 miles from Sam's home. Police anticipated that Sam Herr would appear in the surveillance footage of the ATM. However, when the bank provided the footage, the police were shocked to see a teenager wearing a hoodie, not Sam Herr, withdrawing money from his account. Neither the police nor Sam Herr's parents could identify the mysterious boy. Investigators believed he was probably helping Sam Herr escape or hide. In either case, the Costa Mesa police were determined to find him. On May 26, 2010, they discovered that his credit card had been used for another pizza delivery, and they began tracing the delivery driver. Police went to an address provided by a tipster, expecting to catch Sam Herr, but instead found 17-year-old Wesley Freilich and his friends. Although initially suspected, authorities quickly cleared Wesley's name. However, they discovered that he possessed Sam Herr's credit card. Wesley told investigators a surprising story. He had been given the credit card by Daniel Wozniak, a local theater actor who had met Wesley through community theater. Daniel Wozniak claimed to be a bail bondsman and said he needed help collecting money from Sam Herr. Believing Wozniak's story, Wesley agreed to withdraw cash using the credit card, unaware of the true circumstances. A total of $1,900 was withdrawn from the account, sparking further investigation. The name Daniel Wozniak was familiar to investigators, who had previously found an invitation to his upcoming wedding in Sam Herr's apartment. This raised several questions. Who was Daniel Wozniak, and what was his connection to Sam Herr? Was he involved in helping Sam Herr escape, or was he a more sinister accomplice to the murder? These questions needed to be answered. To understand Daniel Wozniak's potential role, investigators looked into his background. Born on March 23, 1984, Daniel Wozniak was the youngest of 3 brothers. Due to his parents' demanding work schedules, he spent a significant amount of time with his grandparents after school. Daniel Wozniak grew up in a privileged household and was accustomed to luxury. Daniel Wozniak's journey to becoming an actor began in his early 20s. Despite struggling to hold down a job and often having to move to low-paying positions, his passion for acting and singing in musicals kept him going. It was during this time that he met his future wife, a fellow actress, and they eventually got married. However, their happiness was short-lived. On May 26, 2010, the day of Daniel Wozniak's bachelor party in Huntington Beach, California, police arrived with an arrest warrant. This unexpected turn of events linked Daniel Wozniak to the murder of Julie Kibushi, as it turned out that Sam Herr, the suspected killer, lived in the same apartment complex as Daniel Wozniak. Authorities believed that Daniel Wozniak may have helped Sam Herr escape or hide, leading them to assume he was involved in the crime. Police arrested and questioned Daniel Wozniak. Initially, during interrogation, Daniel Wozniak claimed that his only wrongdoing was credit card fraud and that he had covered for his friend Sam Herr. He explained to investigators that he, Sam Herr, and Wesley had planned to withdraw all of his money from the bank and then report the credit cards as stolen. Daniel Wozniak claims he dropped Sam Herr off at a local mall. Detectives remained skeptical, however, believing that Daniel Wozniak was still protecting Sam Herr and had more to do with Julie Kibushi's murder than he had let on. In an effort to uncover the truth, police asked Wozniak to provide a DNA sample, a request that made him nervous. Detectives noticed Daniel Wozniak's nervous behavior when questioned about his DNA being found at Sam Herr's apartment, despite his attempts to act nonchalant. As the pressure mounted, he began to alter his story repeatedly. Eventually, Daniel Wozniak cracked and admitted he knew about Julie Kibushi's murder and had helped the perpetrator escape. However, when reminded that his DNA had been collected, he insisted it would not match any evidence found on Julie Kibushi's body, clinging to the claim of his innocence. Just as detectives were expecting Daniel Wozniak to reveal more information, he abruptly ended the interview. The detectives, determined to uncover the truth, informed Daniel Wozniak that he would be arrested as an accessory to murder if he didn't provide a full account of his involvement. Daniel Wozniak, who was scheduled to get married in just 48 hours, was caught between revealing the truth and avoiding arrest, which would ruin his wedding plans. Under intense questioning, Daniel Wozniak's story began to unravel. Detectives sensed his weakness and accelerated the process by falsely claiming that DNA evidence linked him to Julie Kibushi's body. They misled him, as DNA test results would not be available for weeks. Instead of disputing the claim, Daniel Wozniak surprisingly explained that his DNA would be on Julie Kibushi's body because he was near her. This inconsistent response raised suspicions. As Daniel Wozniak's lies continued to crumble, he made a stunning revelation, which was particularly alarming to detectives because they had initially observed only one gunshot wound at the crime scene. It wasn't until the autopsy was performed that a second gunshot wound was discovered, casting further doubt on Daniel Wozniak's credibility. Daniel Wozniak's confession implicated him as an accomplice to the murder, allowing investigators to formally detain him. However, detectives still needed to locate Sam Herr, and Daniel Wozniak refused to cooperate. Despite being in custody, Daniel Wozniak made a phone call to his fiancée, Rachel Buffett. Unbeknownst to Daniel Wozniak, the conversation was being recorded, which would eventually ensnare him in his own deceit. Rachel decided to prioritize her freedom over her relationship and informed Daniel Wozniak that she would share more information with the detectives. Realizing he needed to act swiftly, Daniel Wozniak became frantic and sought to negotiate a deal with the detectives, a reversal of his stance just hours earlier. Daniel Wozniak revealed a shocking account to the detectives, detailing his sinister murder plan. It began with a seemingly innocuous request to a friend, Sam Herr, whom he considered trustworthy. On May 21, 2010, Daniel Wozniak asked Sam Herr to help him move boxes at the Los Alamitos Theater attic, located on a local military base. Sam Herr was initially unaware of what had happened. When he realized he had been shot, he begged Daniel Wozniak for help. However, Daniel Wozniak showed no mercy. Without hesitation, he reloaded the gun and shot Sam Herr a second time, killing him instantly. The suspect brutally murdered Sam Herr and didn't stop there. He then used Sam Herr's phone to text Julie Kibushi, luring her to Sam Herr's apartment. He left Sam Herr's body in the attic later that night. The suspect snuck into Sam Herr's apartment, where Julie Kibushi had fallen into his trap. He then shot Julie Kibushi twice in the head. Daniel Wozniak altered the crime scene to make people think Sam Herr was the culprit, and he fled after attacking and killing Julie Kibushi. However, Daniel Wozniak realized that he still had to hide Sam Herr's body. Daniel Wozniak went back to the attic and cut off Sam Herr's hands and head to make it harder to identify the body. He then got rid of these body parts in a nearby park. Despite his gruesome actions, Daniel Wozniak appeared to be unaffected and returned to the theater, where he was seen laughing and joking with others in several photos taken at cast parties, which were later found by detectives. The underlying motive for the murders was surprisingly straightforward: money. Daniel Wozniak's financial struggles were well documented, with 2 months of unpaid rent threatening his eviction and no means to fund the lavish wedding and honeymoon he had planned. However, his situation changed dramatically when he discovered that Samher had $62,000 in savings from his military service. This revelation sparked a sinister plan, and Daniel Wozniak brutally murdered 2 innocent people in cold blood, all to fund his own extravagant celebrations. The bag containing crucial evidence against Daniel Wozniak was meant to be disposed of by his brother Tim, but Tim threw it over their parents' fence instead. The bag held incriminating items like bloody clothing, a weapon, and victim Samher's records and passport, all with Daniel's DNA. This treasure trove of evidence helped secure a quick conviction, with Daniel found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder on December 16, 2015. On January 11, 2016, the jury in Daniel Wozniak's trial recommended the death penalty after only 1 hour of deliberation, a remarkably short time for such a serious decision. The judge later sentenced Daniel Wozniak to death on September 23, 2016. Years after the trial, detectives discovered that Rachel Buffett, Daniel Wozniak's former fiancée, had been aware of the murder plots and had misled investigators. Despite her denials, Rachel Buffett was arrested and charged with 3 felony counts of accessory after the fact for allegedly lying to the police on multiple occasions. On September 12, 2018, Rachel Buffett was found guilty of 2 serious charges, which carried a maximum sentence of 44 months in prison. As a result, she received a 32-month prison sentence on November 8, 2018. She was eventually released in 2019. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Sierra Lamar. In March 2012, the Lamar family, consisting of Steve, a computer expert, his wife Marlene, and their 2 daughters, Danielle and Sierra, living in Fremont, California. Sierra was younger sister. She was born on October 19, 1996. Both girls had a relatively comfortable upbringing, with the usual ups and downs that come with family life. However, a disturbing fact about their father's past had a profound impact on the family. When Danielle and Sierra were younger, their father, Steve, was involved in a serious incident involving inappropriate behavior with one of their roommates during a sleepover. As a result, Steve was sentenced to 1 year in prison. Despite Steve's past convictions, both Sierra and Danielle reported having a good relationship with him, describing him as a kind and respected father. However, when Marlene learned about the incident, they decided to end their relationship, which was already struggling. Marlene soon moved on and started a new relationship. Despite this, both Sierra and Danielle attended Washington High School in their community, where they enjoyed socializing and performed reasonably well academically. Sierra was a cheerful and lively girl who was well-liked at school. She enjoyed participating in dance competitions and cheerleading. In October 2011, her mother, Marlene, decided to move from Fremont to Morgan Hill, a town located 40 miles southwest. Sierra, her mother, and her mother's boyfriend, Rick Gardner, settled into a rented ranch-style home on a rural cul-de-sac. However, Sierra was initially unhappy about leaving behind her close friends and hobbies in Fremont. She struggled to adjust to her new school, Sobrato High, where she didn't receive the same warm welcome she had at Washington High. Despite this, Sierra eventually settled in and made new friends, earning the respect and even joining the cheerleading squad again. By March 2012, Sierra had adapted well to her new environment. On March 11th, she had a conversation with her father and her sister, who still lived in Fremont, and updated them on her progress. The conversation was mostly positive, with Sierra expressing excitement about an upcoming school project, wanting to get her hair colored, and discussing her homework with her sister. Her academic performance seemed to be going well. Sierra ended her Thursday evening chat with Danielle and Steve after dinner, as she had school the next day and it was getting late. They agreed to part ways and promised to catch up soon, unaware that this would be their last conversation. The next morning, February 16, 2012, Sierra got ready for school, locking the house behind her. At 6:29 a.m., she tweeted a friend, then put on her shoes and left to catch the bus. The bus stop was located on a desolate road between Palm and Dewey Avenues, far from Sierra's school, Sobrato High. Many students, including Sierra, had to cross this road daily to catch the bus. At 7:11 a.m., Sierra texted a friend to meet up before class. However, when the bus arrived at 7:11 and 15 seconds a.m., Sierra was missing. Sierra didn't show up to school, which her friends found unusual. However, they didn't think it was serious enough to report to the school authorities. The day went on as usual. When the school day ended, Marlene, Sierra's mom, tried to contact Sierra, but her call went straight to voicemail. Although Marlene thought this was strange, she didn't get worried. However, when she got home and saw that Sierra's room was still empty, she realized that something was amiss. She contacted Steve to ask if Sierra was planning to visit him in Fremont again. Unfortunately, the answer was no. When Marlene called Danielle and a few other friends, they all left with the same message that Sierra could not be found. Marlene began to panic when she called Sierra's high school and discovered that she had missed all her classes. After her calling the authorities, officers were immediately sent to the Pedo-Hispanic court. They began by speaking with those closest to Sierra, including several of her friends, who were all candid about the difficulties Sierra and her family were facing. Although Sierra was generally content, it had only been a few months since her mother's divorce forced her to leave her family and old friends behind. Authorities initially thought that Sierra might have left voluntarily, as she had previously mentioned returning to Fremont in a light-hearted and sometimes serious manner. However, there were several things that contradicted this theory. Sierra had stopped posting on social media, her phone was turned off, and all calls went straight to voicemail. She also never arrived at the front door of her home. Her loved ones launched a massive search despite police downplaying her disappearance. The investigation into Sierra's disappearance led to a complex trail of evidence. 2 days after she vanished, data forensics began examining her phone's previous activity. They discovered that her phone had briefly turned on in the middle of the night, before turning off again. The phone's coordinates pointed to a field near Sierra's house, which became a crucial lead in the investigation. A search crew thoroughly searched the fields where Sierra's phone had last been detected. Within minutes, they found the Samsung Galaxy phone she had been using. It was near the road, damaged, and had likely been thrown from a vehicle. Investigators concluded that Sierra hadn't turned on her phone that evening. Instead, they believed that rain had caused a false signal, briefly activating her phone. This coincidence was crucial, as the entire investigation hinged on the discovery of her phone. The case took a disturbing turn when detectives realized that Sierra's phone was probably thrown from a moving vehicle. There were no footprints, tire tracks, or other visible evidence. The next day, a search crew made another discovery. Sierra's backpack was found 2 kilometers from her house, discarded outside a barn. The bag contained her schoolwork, inhaler, and money, suggesting that she had been on her way to school and was forcibly separated from her essential items. Additionally, a complete outfit, believed to be the one Sierra was wearing the morning she vanished, was found in her luggage. This outfit included her pullover, pants, socks, shoes, and even undergarments. The outfit was subjected to DNA testing, which yielded results. Specifically, her pants contained male foreign DNA, suggesting that she had likely been assaulted. The discovery of Sierra's phone and clothing led to a surge of local and international sympathy. The search effort, which had already intensified significantly in the days following her disappearance, received a fresh wave of support. Authorities received over 1,000 new tips, and officers worked more than 7,000 hours. Multiple search teams, comprising over 800 individuals, were deployed to thoroughly search the area. They systematically examined every available lake and reservoir, combed over fields, and searched abandoned buildings. Sierra's disappearance was a major topic of discussion in the community, with missing person posters put up everywhere. Her parents offered a $10,000 reward for any credible information leading to her safe return. Despite the efforts of the community and investigators, only a golf ball and a flipper were found. However, unbeknownst to the public, investigators were making progress in identifying a potential suspect. 12 days after Sierra's disappearance, on March 28, DNA analysis revealed that the DNA on her pants belonged to a local man. As part of the investigation, DNA samples from all 57 registered sex offenders in the Morgan Hill zip code were compared to the DNA evidence. Sierra's father, who had a criminal record, proactively contacted law enforcement and was quickly eliminated as a suspect. One of the local men who had not been ruled out as a suspect was Antolin Garcia Torres. Following a DNA match between the 21-year-old man and Sierra's pants, he came to public attention. At the time, he lived in Maple Leaf Recreational Vehicle Park with his mother, pregnant wife, and daughter, about 7 miles from Sierra's house. Antolin Garcia Torres had a troubling past, had a challenging upbringing marked by abuse and neglect. His father, who was abusive and often drunk, had threatened to kill him and his mother before being imprisoned for molesting a young family member. The father's abusive behavior appears to have been passed on to his son. Although 2009 allegations of having sex with a minor were dismissed, Antolin Garcia Torres's DNA was collected. He was also detained in 2010 for impeding police operations. Due to the suspicious relationship between he and Sierra, detectives put him under constant surveillance. As it was unclear whether Sierra was still alive, Antolin Garcia Torres was the most likely person to have information. To monitor his activities, police tapped his phone, placed a GPS tracker in his car, and had 2 undercover investigators move into a vehicle park next to his house. After discovering that the vehicle park had cameras at the front door, investigators began reviewing security footage from the neighborhood around Antolin Garcia Torres's residence. They examined the film taken on the day of Sierra's disappearance to determine whether Antolin had left or arrived home. It was discovered that Antolin had left the campground in his red Volkswagen Jetta at 7 a.m. on the morning she vanished. Given that his home was only 7 miles from Sierra, Antolin's travel time matched the period during which Sierra could have been kidnapped. Although Antolin had left for work at the usual time, Safeway's shift records showed that he did not arrive at work on Sierra went missing. It was found that 3 years prior, there were 3 unsuccessful kidnapping attempts in the Safeway parking lot. But none of the perpetrators were identified or detained. The only evidence from these attempts was a taser dropped by the perpetrator, which had a fingerprint on one of its batteries. However, it was only a partial fingerprint, requiring a direct one-to-one comparison to match. The idea seemed promising, but when Antolin's fingerprints were compared to those on the taser, a surprising revelation emerged. In reality, their suspect was indeed Antolin. Antolin was taken into custody by investigators after being positively identified as someone who was present when Sierra went missing. His DNA was found on her pants, and he had a history of involvement in kidnappings. This evidence was enough to detain him for questioning and to seize his vehicle for further DNA testing. During the interview, the suspect, Antolin, showed arrogance and was dismissive of the questions. He claimed that on the day Sierra vanished, he had gone fishing and didn't know who she was. He was confident that the investigators wouldn't find any evidence against him. However, before the interview ended, Antolin made a strange revelation. He admitted to having a habit of strangling a snake while driving and then throwing the tissue out the window. He also claimed to have thrown out a used tissue in the exact spot where Sierra's bag was found on the morning she went missing. We already had a 1 in a million chance with the rain on Sierra's phone, and the police didn't believe Antoline's implausible explanation either. On May 21, 2012, Antoline Garcia Torres was formally detained in connection with Sierra Lamar's disappearance outside his workplace in a Safeway parking lot. This was the result of several distinct links between Sierra and Antoline's vehicle. A DNA test found her DNA on the interior door handle of the car's rear door. Additionally, fibers from the car seats matched those found on Sierra's clothing, and a piece of rope inside the car contained a strand of her hair. This proved beyond a doubt that she had been in his car at some point. However, even after his arrest, there was a significant issue. Despite the apparent evidence, Sierra's body had yet to be found. Could they accuse Antoline of first-degree murder without a body or verified death? In reality, Santa Clara County District Attorney Jeff Rosen announced on May 19, 2014, that he would seek the death penalty against Antoline. Although Antoline had previously pleaded not guilty to killing Sierra, the overwhelming evidence pointed to his guilt. Antoline's trial began on January 30, 2017, after being delayed. The trial was prolonged and stressful for all parties involved, with the prosecution and defense presenting lengthy arguments over 13 weeks of testimony. Antoline's defense team argued that his exposure to pesticides from surrounding fields during his childhood may have impaired his cognitive abilities. They claimed that this exposure was not his fault and, as a result, he should not be eligible for the death penalty. The defense argued that Antoline faced a unique disadvantage due to circumstances beyond his control. In a final attempt, Antoline's defense team requested a new trial, questioning the chief investigator's reliability and honesty, and alleging that he had tampered with evidence in the past. However, this attempt was denied. The jury convicted Antoline Garcia Torres of Sierra Lamar's first-degree murder on May 9, 2017. The evidence was so overwhelming against Antoline that he was unable to escape responsibility for his acts, even though Sierra's body has never been located. Outside of the evidence offered, Antoline was formally given a life sentence without the chance of parole after being spared the death penalty. Since his sentencing, Antoline has stayed largely silent, and despite receiving hundreds of letters from news organizations and total strangers, only one letter has been answered. Antoline wrote, "I hold fast to my innocence, and I'm not going to talk about the matter." It's puzzling why Annalyn continues to claim innocence despite the overwhelming evidence against him. The presence of his DNA on Sierra's belongings, her DNA in his car, his past crimes, and a detailed timeline all clearly indicate his involvement in Sierra's disappearance. The search for Sierra Lamar is believed by some organizers to be the longest continuous search for a missing person in U.S. history. It spanned 3 years, with over 1,100 searches conducted within a 15-mile radius, totaling 50,000 man-hours of effort. Volunteers braved extreme weather conditions, from scorching summers to cold winters, in their quest for any information about Sierra. Despite the passing of time, many volunteers continue to search for her, driven by the desire to bring closure to her family, even though they acknowledge the likelihood of her being deceased. Currently, the whereabouts of Sierra's body remain unknown, but the hope is that one day, the Lamar family will find the closure they seek.